Buckingham Palace, and perhaps quite poignantly, inside that service, the great-great-grandson of Sir Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister in 1945, of course, Alexander Churchill, just 10 years old. He will be lighting the candle of peace during that service, a poignant reminder that that younger generation, those next generations, should be remembering the sacrifices of their forefathers. In the next couple of moments, we are expecting His Majesty the King to sweep into view. The camera is just going to pan and you're going to be able to see the royal car and the royal standard containing His Majesty the King and Queen. The King and Queen, for those of you listening on the radios, are just arriving outside the Great West Door of Westminster Abbey in the Royal Bentley, the Royal Standard flying above that car, of course. The last to arrive as our head of state, and you can just about see His Majesty the King there, and he is wearing a lounge suit with medals and a neck order. And Her Majesty the Queen, who you can see just behind one of the dignitaries there, is wearing a white crepe silk dress and a white coat with black stitching by Anna Valentine, with a black and white hat by Philip Tracy. And Her Majesty is also wearing a brooch of the 12th Lancers, which, if I'm not mistaken, is the regiment that her own father, Major Bruce Shand, fought during World War II. He fought in Egypt during the Second World War. So in the next few moments, we're about 2 minutes on from midday, where this national 2-minute silence will be taking place to commemorate those who lost their lives during the war and fought during the war for our freedom. This service is expected to last around an hour or so. It's going to be incredibly poignant. Politicians of all stripes inside, former prime ministers, as well as those veterans who fought during the Second World War. As I said, the King and Prince of Wales are going to be laying wreaths at the tomb of the unknown soldier. For now, I will hand over to Tom Harwood and Emily Carver in our studio.
Well, Cameron Walker, thank you so much for bringing us all of that, all the activity there outside Westminster Abbey, as we wait not long now to go until that 2-minute silence, remembering those who fell in the war to defend our freedom, but also to remember the victory that we delivered, freeing the continent from Nazi tyranny.
Absolutely. We've seen commemorations all week, haven't we? We've also seen celebrations. We've seen street parties. We've heard from veterans. There are still a number of veterans who served in the Second World War who are still here today and speak of their memory. Many of them haven't spoken about what they went through at all. We are just very close to this 2-minute silence now, which the nation will fall silent at 12 midday to remember those who sacrificed their lives for our freedom today, and very worth remembering. OK, well, thank you for marking that 2-minute silence with us to, of course, commemorate those who sacrificed their lives, many of whom lost their lives in the Second World War, so that 80 years on, we can celebrate Victory Day in Europe.
Well, a very good afternoon to you. It is Good Afternoon Britain just after midday. My name's Tom Harwood and this is the Thursday, the 8th of May, of course, VE Day.
It is indeed. I'm Emily Carver. Now, after a week of celebrations, as we've said, today does mark 80 years since that very special day where we can mark victory in Europe.
The end of nearly 6 years of war, when the Nazi forces surrendered unconditionally to the Allies in the Second World War.
Hostilities will end officially at 1 minute after midnight tonight, Tuesday, the 8th of May.
Well, those are the famous words of Winston Churchill, which sparked people to take to the streets across Britain to celebrate.
And yes, 80 years later, the spirit does live on. We're live around the country throughout this very special show today, across the breadth, the width and breadth of the country to see what people are doing to commemorate and celebrate this special day.
Well, joining us now in the studio is the constitutional historian Luke Blaxill. Thanks so much for being with us. This is, of course, a moment that some people will, of course, remember the original moment of celebration. What was the country sort of feeling, doing back then in 1945?
Well, I think that the coming defeat of Nazi Germany had been in the offing for a couple of weeks prior to that, but this was a time where we saw millions taking to the street, improvised trestle tables, bunting, the great tradition of British street parties and celebration. But I think the really important thing to remember is this wasn't an orchestrated celebration that we might see, for example, with a jubilee or a coronation. This was a genuine people's celebration, impromptu, spontaneous and joyous, a people's celebration for what I think befits a people's war.
Must have been such a sense of relief at that moment too.
Yeah, it's a sense of belief that 6 years of catastrophic fighting had come to an end. The desire to be able to see loved ones who will be returning from military action, but also, I think, a profound sense of optimism about what the new world would look like, both domestically and internationally, and the beginning that this could really represent a new page in human history. And really, that's very much true. It was a new chapter on the 9th of May 1945, and it's one that we're still writing today.
And it is, of course, such a profound moment because for the first time, it was a total war. It was a war that people who didn't have to be posted to a foreign land to feel. People will have seen the bombs drop in major cities in this country. People will have dug up their back gardens and planted vegetables. People will have been under a rationing regime, and that rationing regime would last for years to come after the war as well. People in every strata of society would have felt this war more than perhaps any other before.
Yes, exactly, and that's why Winston Churchill said that it was a victory for every party and for every class, and what he meant by that was that this was a war that touched everybody, domestically and indeed many throughout the empire as well. It wasn't like the Great War where there was to some extent a disconnect between the actual experiences of those who actually fought. Sometimes you came home to a domestic population that didn't quite understand what they'd actually been through, but this of course was not the case in the Second World War because of the way in which it touched people economically, socially, literally on the home front in terms of bombing. It genuinely was a people's war, and that's why I suppose the commemoration of it really represents a people's memory.
And 80 years on, the world has changed unrecognisably, and completely different threats that we now face. Is this also a time to remember that and the people who are still fighting to this day in various conflicts around the world?
Of course it is. I also think that for much of the war, of course, the future was uncertain. It was not clear who would eventually be victorious or indeed what shape that victory would actually transpire to be. And so those who are fighting in wars all over the world do so without the certainty that they will be victorious, without the certainty that they will even come home themselves. And to some extent, the lot to be a soldier, to serve your own country and to potentially die in the service of that country is something very profound. ground, and that's something we have to respect, of course, across all nations, even though, you know, our hearts today probably go out more towards our own servicemen who lost their own lives in that conflict.
And it's a strange and funny memory, I suppose, to think of, for Britain more than any other country. For the United States, what a moment of victory, a moment of ascension as a global power. For Britain, yes, a moment of victory, but also a moment of loss.
Yes.
Because the United Kingdom, from that moment onwards, I mean, perhaps the last time Britain was seen as a superpower was 1945, was Potsdam, was Yalta. The idea that Britain was at the top 3 in the world, perhaps for the last time, was felt in 1945.
Yes, I mean, what VE Day meant for different Allied countries was different. For France, it was rebirth. For the former Soviet Union, it was the literal blood sacrifice of 20 million dead. For the United States, it was the triumph of an industrial and military machine that had remade the world. For Britain, it was standing alone, you know, in the world's darkest hour. But that victory, as you say, did in a sense have a bittersweet lining, because, of course, in the years that followed, the fact that Britain was bankrupted, the fact that the New World Order was remade in important socio and economic ways that made empire hard to sustain, meant that it also saw the unwinding of Britain's superpower status. And so the irony was that, you know, Britain did help save the world, but that was at the price of that historic superpower status.
Ultimate sacrifice, in a way. There's something quite biblical about that.
Yes, I think in its way that's true. That Britain didn't see those benefits, that the years that followed did see decolonisation, you know, in a graceful manner, the adaptation eventually into the European community, the signing of peace treaties throughout the world, the acceptance that Britain wouldn't be a superpower in the world that had changed in the way that it now had. Because the Second World War, while of course it was a victory for what we stood for, also changed the world in quite a lot of other profound political ways, which had the effect of probably weakening Britain's influence in the new world. But I don't think anybody then or now would say that that was a sacrifice not worth paying.
Well, Luke Blacksall, please do stay with us, a constitutional historian there. We will just bring you the breaking news that the Bank of England has decided to cut interest rates from 4.5% to 4.25%. So there you go. We'll bring you more analysis on that very soon.
This was the expected move. Economists across the board had expected those rates to be cut, and it does come in the context of perhaps a shining new trade deal with the United States being announced later on today. We'll keep eyes on that. But let's return to the day's commemorations now, because our royal correspondent Cameron Walker joins us live from Westminster Abbey. And Cameron, a day of commemoration and to some extent celebration.
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. And it's been a poignant start, actually, to this 1 hour long service inside Westminster Abbey, intended by the King and Queen, other members of the royal family and senior politicians of past and present. At the end of the 2-minute silence, an extract of the poem was sang by Westminster Abbey's choir. The poem For the Fallen, which obviously features the words, "At the going down of the sun and in the morning we will remember them." That's the poem by Robert Lawrence Binion. And the King and the Prince of Wales have, in the last few moments, laid a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier. On their messages attached to the wreaths, the King's message simply said, "We will never forget," and he signed it Charles R meaning Rex, which is King in Latin. And the Prince of Wales, William, wrote, "For those who made the ultimate sacrifice during the Second World War, we will remember them." And the white card was signed by both the Prince and Princess of Wales, William and Catherine. But stood next to the King and the Prince of Wales as they laid the wreaths was the veteran Ken Hay, who is 99 years old, and he served during the Second World War in the infantry regiment. So there's lots of moving parts to this Westminster Abbey service, and I think one of the highlights will certainly be the great-great-grandson of Sir Winston Churchill, Alexander Churchill, who's just 10 years old, lighting the candle of peace. And of course, that is a gentle reminder to all of us that that next generation, those 10-year-olds of today, need to remember the sacrifices of their forefathers as they fought for our freedoms 80 years on. Also being processed down the Abbey towards the high altar is a gas mask and an air raid warden's helmet, specially donated from the Imperial War Museum as a gentle reminder of the home front, particularly during the Blitz in 1940 and 1941 as German bombs fell on British towns and cities. But of course today, as you said, Tom, it's about celebrating victory in Europe 80 years on, and tonight the King and Queen will be at a special concert at Horse Guards Parade, a big bit of a celebration perhaps from this commemorative service taking place inside the Abbey this afternoon.
Thank you so much. Cameron Walker there outside Westminster Abbey for us. I don't know about you, Tom, but on days like this, it does make me reflect on not only the people who lost their lives and gave their lives and sacrificed all for our future, but also about the state of Britain today and whether we have that strong sense of national pride. Do we have that sense of social cohesion? I mean, we see surveys this week coming out from armed services charities saying, you know, not that many people out there, young people, know what VE Day is all about. Yeah. Not that many people would be willing under any circumstances to go out and fight for this country. I would say that more men say they would than women, for perhaps obvious reasons. But it's just one of those times to reflect on, you know, whether we do still have that sort of, you know, attitude of gumption. Of gumption, yes. Yeah. Perhaps people at home might reflect on that too. Let us know what you make of it.
They do say the past is a foreign country, and it does seem that Britain has changed immeasurably over the course of the last 80 years. Our role in the world, how we see ourselves, our economic and military might. I mean, all of these things are completely changed. And to some extent, we haven't quite yet found a comfortable new role in the world. We think of ourselves still as one of those top-tier nations, and in many, many things we are, but also in many things we're not. Yeah,
I think we've changed, some for the good and some for the worse, perhaps. Let us know. But we are out and about today, speaking to real people out on the streets and at the celebrations. Our reporters are up and down the country. Anna Riley is in Redcar for us. Anna, what's happening in Redcar?
Good afternoon. Well, we're just by the seafront at the moment. You can just see behind me here the crowd that has gathered. You mentioned there about educating younger people. We can see the group of school children here that have come out to listen. There's some even younger children in the crowd just down there that are dressed up as evacuees. This has all been led by the Royal British Legion. There's also the RNLI present here as well. We can see firemen in the background as well, and other armed services that have joined. Currently what's happening is the branch president for the Royal British Legion for Redcar is giving a poem and a speech about the importance of VE Day. He's just finished up that speech. Now we can hear the crowd clapping, and just before these speeches started there was a parade of standard bearers that went along the seafront to start coming up here. Earlier on we spoke to the local MP for Redcar, Anna Turley, and this is what she told us about the celebrations in the town today.
It's just a lovely day to pay tribute to the amazing generation that we'll never see the like of again. Their service, their sacrifice, and to celebrate what they achieved for us, freedom in this country, freedom in Europe. It's a wonderful thing, 80 years on, to remember that sacrifice. And we've got a whole day of festivities and parties going on across Redcar today.
We can see as well now the standard bearers behind us reading that poem about the going down of the Somme. A lot of veterans gathered here today, and not all veterans can make it to events like this, so we spoke to some singing veterans earlier. They're going out and about in care homes in Redcar today, spreading the cheer. This is what they sung to us earlier.
We'll meet again, don't know where, don't know when, but I know we'll meet again some sunny day. Keep smiling through, just like you always do. That's to everybody out there flying the flags today, remembering those that paid the ultimate sacrifice on VE Day. Those that fought in the Second World War, lest we forget. Let's have a good day, fly the flags and be proud to be British.
Lest we forget the message from the veterans there, and we can just see the standard bearers making that final.
Wow, well, thank you very much, Anna Riley, live there from Redcar. Also with us, of course, is Tony Maguire from Glasgow Cathedral. Jack Carson is at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire. And Doogie Beattie is in Shankill Road, Belfast, for us. So let's go to Jack Carson now at the National Arboretum Memorial. Jack, what's the scene where you are?
Well, we've had a bit of a celebration this morning. We've got some 1940s singers, bit of a party atmosphere as well. But there's more than 1,000 people expected here at the Arboretum for the service a little bit later on at 4 o'clock. We'll come together. We're joined by more than 40 veterans from World War II here today. We're joined by a veteran who fought in the Falklands and Northern Ireland, Patrick Meagher. Thank you so much for joining us. You're remembering your dad today on 80 years on.
Yes, yeah, I'm remembering my father.
And where was he? Was he Army or Navy, Air Force?
Marine. He was a Royal Marine. He did his service in the war, and he was in Italy, Africa, because they're all African Star and everything.
And how proud are you to be able to wear medals, you know, and represent his service on a day like today?
As well as I wear my own, if you see what I mean, as well as I do my own, right?
Oh, I'm terribly sorry. We seem to have some connection issues there. We'll be back at the National Arboretum as soon as we re-establish that connection. But for now, let's go to Doogie Beattie. Doogie, where are you?
I'm actually in Lisburn. I'm heading over to the Shankill Road just in about an hour's time, but we've come down just behind the War Memorial into the bowling green in the park behind us, and it really was very emotional to watch that 2-minute silence. Politicians, civic members, veterans, all joining together in this garrison town. Of course, Lisburn is where the head of the British Army is in Northern Ireland. It was established in 1940, Thethel Barracks. And Northern Ireland gives more to the British Army per capita than any other region of the UK. And they have paid the price for it in a big way. In fact, it just came to mind that Lord Basil Brooke was the Prime Minister of Northern Ireland. In 1945, he'd already lost one son in that conflict, and just a couple of weeks before VE Day happened, he had to go out onto the balconies and tell everybody about the end of a war, and 2 weeks beforehand he had lost another son. That shows you the character of the man, and it must have played hard on his mind that people were out partying and celebrating this while he, like many others, had lost children in it. Now, anything to do with the British Army in Northern Ireland has always been very controversial because of the troubles here, and people like Colonel Paddy Meehan have not really been noticed or reflected upon. In fact, there is now a challenge group about getting him posthumously awarded the VC, and that is going on, but inside Northern Ireland that has been kept very quiet because of course Paddy Meehan was the head of the SAS. But I spoke to Emma Little-Pengelly earlier on, the Deputy First Minister of Northern Ireland, and this is what she had to say about today's events.
Well, I think when you look back 80 years ago, of course, across Northern Ireland, this was a huge day. And it's right that today that we not just mark and commemorate the incredible sacrifice of so many from Northern Ireland, the contribution to that war effort, but of course it's a day of celebration, the celebration of that victory in Europe, that victory over fascism and Nazism, and a victory to which people from this place played such a huge role. We've got a very long and rich history of military contribution and service. And of course what we also want to do is to contribute to that defence and to those necessary things that are required in order to defend the United Kingdom, to defend Europe. And that's why, for example, Gavin Robinson has been working hard at Westminster to ensure that Northern Ireland gets its fair share, for example, of defence spend. We've got huge expertise here, particularly in advanced engineering in terms of aerospace and defence. It's a very strong industry for us.
Well, you can see politicians, civic leaders and veterans have done their bit this morning. They have been very measured, very respectful, and now it's time to head to those areas that really did supply those soldiers and see what sort of parties and celebrations are being had there. for the rest of the day, we will be in West Belfast on Shankill Road.
Thank you very much, Doogie Beattie there in Lisbon. Tony Maguire is still left to speak to us. Tony, you're in Glasgow. Tell us more.
Hello, good afternoon. Well, would it be a commemorative event if Tony Maguire wasn't fighting bagpipes for the airwaves? And, you know, true to form, the piper is here. He will be piping in the procession in just a few minutes' time, and that's going to be joined by a colour party with the standard bearers heading into Glasgow Cathedral. And in there we'll have Reverend Mark Johnston, a fantastic orator, can't say it enough, and he will surely be delivering a homily to remember for everybody here. And of course this is such a fascinating occasion, so emotionally charged, of, you know, a lot of remembrance, a lot of kind of sadness and reflection, but that's all mixed in the soup with the jubilation and the relief, of course, that so many come home. And that has certainly been in some of the conversations I've already had today. Some veterans here who remember, of course, VE Day, those 80 years ago, along with some newer recruits in the Merchant Navy, the RAF and the Royal Navy, all here to mark this special 80th anniversary. And they'll, of course, be joined by the Lord Provost of Glasgow, who said earlier on today, Jacqueline McLaren, that today was a day to rejoice for peace and freedom, and that is sometimes something that we take for granted. Well, surely enough, she'll be sat on the pews alongside Deputy First Minister Kate Forbes, as well as many of the Scottish representatives of the British Armed Forces. And, you know, I'm sure you can just hear that over my voice there, the bagpipe music. You know, it's got that sense of celebration to it. And while these occasions are so usually sad and sombre and very much about the reflection, you know, today is got the feeling that it's very much a little bit different.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Tony Maguire there outside Glasgow Cathedral for us. And thank you to Anna Riley as well, Doogie Beattie, and of course, Jack Carson too.
Absolutely. Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News, and there's plenty more coming on today's programme. Indeed, within the last few minutes, that interest rate decision cut from 4.5 to 4.25%. What has the government got to say about that? Well, we'll reveal all after this.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Nana Queer, weekends from 3 p.m.
They're saying all the right things. They've set some examples. They've given a bit of perspective. You know, I think it is true. I don't think there is a toxic environment working there. I worked for the BBC for 31 years and I still contribute to the BBC, and I'm in touch with a lot of people that work there. I don't think anyone would say it's toxic, but it is true. There are pockets of bad behaviour. There are certain individuals who have regarded themselves as untouchable, where people feel they can't speak up. So I think the report's accurate, and I think, you know, a reset on behaviour, the emphasis on calling it out, more transparency and improved HR process, all of that is really good. But my two main concerns, one is we've been here before, haven't we? Because we had a report after the Jimmy Savile scandal, and that just, you know, it felt like really nothing changed after that. So my concern is this is just going to be another report, lots of fine words and so on, nothing really changes significantly. The second thing I think is missing from the report, and it hardly gives any attention to this, is the huge salaries that are earned by some individuals, both in front of the screen and behind the camera, you know, in managerial roles and senior editor roles. And, you know, compared with what producers and journalists are earning, there are massive imbalances there. There are some people who are earning 200, 300, 400, 500,000 pounds and more, working with people who are on 35, 40,000 pounds. And when you get imbalances like that, that accentuates the risk of bad behaviour. It creates disharmony within teams, and I've seen it myself.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK.
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Some breaking news for you coming in the last few minutes. Yes, the Bank of England has cut interest rates down from 4.5% to 4.25%.
Yes, it's the fourth time interest rates have been cut in the current cycle. Now, this news does come after President Donald Trump's tariff turbulence, but it does look like at some point this afternoon, perhaps around the 3 o'clock mark, we might be hearing about those tariffs being, well, shedded slightly.
Yeah, we don't know quite the extent of it yet, but Donald Trump does say it will be a comprehensive agreement. Make of that what you will. But let's return to these interest rates now. Joining us is the economist, former advisor to Margaret Thatcher as well, Patrick Minford. Patrick, thanks so much for being on the programme for us. This is broadly in line with what economists were expecting today.
Yes, it is. I would have welcomed more, actually. The thing is that they have cut the rate of growth of the money supply very substantially about 6 months ago, and that usually heralds general reduction in inflation. And so I think they could be more confident in cutting rates now as a result of what they've done before to correct their previous mistakes.
Presumably, the Treasury and the government will very much welcome this decision, though any cut will go down well when it comes to all the difficulties that we're facing in terms of economic growth, getting the economy going.
Yes, it will, of course. I mean, the thing is that the bank is in an important position to try to stabilize the economy. And at the moment, the priority is to stop the recession gathering pace. Things are a bit grim at the moment with the whole Trump debacle over tariffs. Of course, we hope that there'll be a good trade agreement later on today, which will be progress in that and a good thing to hope for.
Of course, over in the United States, there are huge concerns that there could be a recession induced by Donald Trump's tariffs, but also higher inflation due to, of course, the higher cost of imports that those tariffs account for. I mean, that would really be the worst of both worlds, both a decline, well, a reduction in the size of the economy coupled with high inflation. I mean, stagflation or even a recession combined with inflation. Are we at risk of that here in this country?
No, I don't think so. You see, the thing is that this has caused a recession. It's causing a recession worldwide, and that's driving down the price of oil and gas and energy. So that's likely to spill over to us. And the rise in inflation is really an American own goal. It's the result of its tariffs, which of course raised the price to consumers of all its imports and the home goods that compete with them. So it's really self-harm by the US that you're referring to here, rising inflation and of course reduction in output as well and employment.
We're seeing this potential deal set to be announced at 3 o'clock. Quite exciting, really, for those who follow such things. But is this not an indicator that Donald Trump is there and willing to negotiate? Yes, Britain first, other countries may follow, and the consequences of the tariffs initially announced, well, they may well cease to exist.
Well, that would be very good news, of course. I mean, what we have is enormous uncertainty because we've no idea what Donald Trump is trying to do. And he doesn't seem to be very clear himself, does he? So that we must hope that out of these negotiations, we get a reversal of the original plans and actually that tariffs don't go up nearly as much as initially talked about. So that's what we've got to hope for.
And yet, if this baseline tariff, because all the reporting I've seen so far suggests that we will still have a 10% baseline tariff on everything, but the extra high tariffs on for example, our car industry will be cut as a result of this deal. If there is still that baseline tariff, we might be in a worse position than we were before the tariffs were announced. It's just better than since the tariffs were announced. I wonder, is there a slightly strange positive effect of Donald Trump's tariffs for us here at home, in that if trade flows become diverted away from the United States, they're less likely to import the goods that are made in Europe or East Asia or wherever, and those goods are diverted to the United Kingdom instead, and we sort of get a glut of imports. Could we see prices fall in this country as a consequence of prices raising in the United States?
Yes, we could. We could. I mean, the key point is for us to maintain free trade and to cut our tariffs as much as possible, to keep competition and low prices in the British economy. That's good for consumers, and it's good for the economy because it's more competition, and it makes everybody raise their productivity and keep their prices down. So, yes, you're right. The key thing is for us to stay cool and to keep our tariffs down. And the more we can encourage the US to do the same, the better for them, but also the better, obviously, for everybody in general.
Well, Patrick Minford, thank you very much indeed for coming on and reacting to both that interest rates news and also looking ahead to what may come at 3 o'clock. Patrick Minford, economist and former advisor to Margaret Thatcher, no less. So there you go, 3 o'clock. We'll find out what is to be announced. So Donald Trump is going to announce this trade deal or this reduction in tariffs between our two countries. There you go, fantastic graphic we've got there for you. Major US-UK announcement. Then I believe an hour later or so, Keir Starmer is going to deliver his assessment of things.
Which
so you've
really
got a busy afternoon.
Suggests who's in the driving seat, doesn't it?
Yes.
If Keir Starmer doesn't want to say a thing until he's heard what Donald Trump has to say,
because Trump could change his mind.
Perhaps he worries that Trump will change his mind. But it is worth saying that early this morning, Trump said there will be a very big and exciting day for the United States of America and the United Kingdom. He then went on to say the agreement with the United Kingdom is a full and comprehensive one that will cement the relationship between the United States and the United Kingdom for many years to come. He added that because of our long-time history and our allegiance together, it is a great honour to have the United Kingdom as our first announcement. Many other deals, which are in serious stages of negotiation, are to follow.
Well, pretty cool, isn't it? We're first to get our special deal.
Some might say front of the queue.
Front of the queue, not back of the queue. Who was it who said we'd be at the back of the queue?
President Obama.
It was. Well, President Trump, apparently we're at the front, so that's a good thing. At least, even if those 10% tariffs do remain on most things. But yes, do stay tuned this afternoon, because as well as the VE Day celebrations, we are, of course, going to be bringing you that announcement live, and it's going to be on Martin Daubney's show.
Absolutely. But do stay with us here on Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. There's plenty more to come. We're continuing our coverage of the Victory in Europe Day, and we want to know, what does VE Day mean to you?
Yes, what are you doing to commemorate? Let us know. How does it make you reflect on the state of Britain today? Would you fight for Britain? Would you be happy for your children, your grandchildren, to fight for the future of this nation? Let us know.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be a dry day ahead, plenty of sunny spells, though that cloud sticking around for some. But where you do see the sunshine, it is going to be feeling warm. That's away from the east, though. The reason for the dry, settled weather is because we do have high pressure building across the country, but it's also dragging in a northeasterly flow. So more cloud feeding into eastern areas, a bit more of a breeze here. So that's just going to add on to a bit of a chill for the day. But many areas dry, settled, plenty of sunny spells, particularly across the west and across the far south. And it should be feeling warm in that sunshine too. Highs around 18 to 19 degrees Celsius, but across eastern areas temperatures only reaching around the mid-teens, so feeling a little bit chilly in that breeze. To finish off the day across Scotland, once again it should remain mostly dry. We'll see a mix of cloud and some clearer skies to finish off the day, and it's going to be fairly similar across Northern Ireland and northern parts of England. Some patchy cloud and also some clearer skies. Fairly similar once again elsewhere across England and Wales. There's still a fair amount of cloud lingering on across central parts of England. As we finish off the evening and head through the overnight period, it's not much change really, staying dry, a mix of cloud and clear skies, but a chance we could start to see some mist and fog develop by the time we reach the morning. And where we see the clearest of skies, temperatures are soon going to be slipping away. It's likely to be a chillier night compared to last night, possibly even seeing some frost by the morning, though this should be fairly isolated. So a chilly start, any mist and fog clearing quite readily, and once again it's going to be a dry, settled day. It's likely there's going to be more sunshine around if you compare it to this afternoon, particularly across central areas where the cloud is set to linger on Thursday. That's away from the northwest though, more clouds spilling in here, possibly some light outbreaks of rain by the afternoon, but otherwise feeling much warmer, particularly across eastern areas, highs of around 21 degrees Celsius.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon, this is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. On the M90 northbound, a broken down vehicle is causing restrictions near Broxton roundabout. Drivers should proceed with caution. In Cheshire West and Chester, expect a 10-minute delay on the M53 southbound between junctions 4 and 7 due to a road incident. All lanes are currently closed. The A465 is closed in both directions from Dowlais Top to CFN Coed for improvement work, with diversions in place. Follow posted signs and allow extra travel time. And on the trains, Avanti West Coast and Transpennine Express services face major disruptions between Oxenholme Lake District and Carlisle. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Well, welcome back. It's 12:38. You're watching Good Afternoon Britain, and it is a special edition, as you can see, 80 years on from VE Day. And interesting words from the great-great-grandson of Sir Winston Churchill, 10 years old, Alexander Churchill. Very sweet. He says young Britain should never forget their war heroes, and he says he felt very honoured to have been chosen to participate in the service and the commemorations at Westminster Abbey today. He believes that people can learn a lot from remembering those who sacrificed their lives. Now, Luke Blaxill, constitutional historian, is with us, and that's why it is so important to keep marking these dates, keep marking them, keep it alive, keep the memory alive, even though we don't have many veterans left from that period, do we?
Right, I think that's a key point. So the fact that we don't have very many veterans remaining, those who actually saw the war for themselves. I mean, throughout all of our lives, those people have been among us. The memory of the war has been literally lived through their own stories or through their very presence. Now, increasingly, you know, we have a few veterans still remaining. That may not be the case in the 90th celebrations. And so, thus, then it passes into memorialisation, to teaching. We need to build a bridge between that generation who literally remembered it and a new generation which don't. But we've seen that successfully, I think, achieved with the First World War. 15 years ago, it was the last few surviving veterans from that conflict. But we have, you know, the Poppy Appeal, we have Armistice, we have the Minute Silence, we have all of those things which help us remember that. And I don't think it's fair to say that Britain has forgotten the sacrifice of the soldiers in the Great War, so hopefully not this time.
It's a bit worrying when you have charities coming out, armed forces charities, with new surveys suggesting that 6 in 10 Gen Zers have never heard of VE Day.
Yes.
I mean, are schools neglecting this? Is it parents not bothering to say anything about these types of things? What is it, a lack of education?
I think it is important to remember those days. I think a generalised impression of what happened is probably more important than remembering specific days themselves, but nonetheless, clearly, if future generations are going to understand what memorialisation means, they're going to have a basic grasp of what actually happened.
You might be relying on fewer and fewer people to keep these days going, to keep the commemorations going. That's what I worry about going into the future.
And yet, I think I'm right in saying that Armistice Day was not, it was not treated as a big state occasion for decades and decades and decades after both wars. I think it only came about in the 1960s or 1970s that the country really started taking Armistice Day seriously, which was a surprise when I learnt this, because you sort of assumed that it started in 1918 and continued on. But sometimes you get ebbs and flows.
Yeah, so you get traditions being reinvented and re-emphasised, and just because there's a break in something doesn't mean it can't be re-remembered, in a sense, not re-romanticised exactly, but the ceremonies and traditions given a new kind of language to make them relevant to a modern generation. And so I think the fact that while it's true that the signal may be being lost with the direct participants in the war, there are many, many opportunities to memorialise this in a respectful way, but perhaps also a new way that speaks to a new generation, to build that generational bridge.
Now, of course, we've been hearing so much about the figures from this time. We were just looking at the King there announcing the eventual unconditional surrender of Nazi Germany. But someone else who, of course, gave a famous speech upon victory in Europe was Winston Churchill. We touched upon some of his words a little bit earlier, saying it was a victory for all parties, for all classes. But perhaps he went a little bit too far with that, because, of course, the country took that really rather literally just months later when he was turfed out of office and a new party, the Labour Party, was brought in.
Yes, much to his own surprise. The country, while regarded Churchill with immense popularity, while he touched people's hearts and while much of the cheering was also in part for him as well as for the King, of course, he suffers an enormous general election defeat in 1945, and a new generation of political leaders, men and women, are brought in. However, I do think that, perhaps on reflection, while Churchill would have been disappointed with that, he would also, I think, have realised that winning the war and then winning the new peace were different questions. And the Labour Party's manifesto in 1945 was called "Let Us Face the Future" for a reason. And, Churchill, for all he represented, and he did, of course, go on to become Prime Minister again, was perhaps seen as being less of Britain's post-war future than other politicians, even though he did such sterling service in allowing that future to take place.
It's so interesting how that election became a question not of things past, but of things future. And so often when Prime Ministers call elections, they want the question to be one issue, and it becomes a completely different issue. I mean, Ted Heath suffered the same fate in 1974. But I wonder, given what we know about how that election was fought and the tumultuous 5.5, 6 years that followed, the rationing that continued, some would argue voluntarily by the socialist government that then took office. It's interesting that Churchill, despite being seen as a figure of the past, was then voted back in.
Yes, I mean, he clearly had unfinished business with domestic British politics. Churchill had been, of course, involved indeed as a Liberal politician right up to the beginning of the 20th century, but I think he wanted a term as Prime Minister in peacetime to show what he could do there as well. I mean, he had a spiralling ambition as a politician. He would, of course, have gone down, as probably ended up being his legacy, as a Great War leader, but he did want to have another term as Prime Minister. And of course, the Conservative governments throughout the 1950s, which he began to lead and was continued, of course, by other Prime Ministers like Macmillan and Eden, did in many respects carry on the flame of what the Labour government from 45 to 51 had established. They were consensus governments, so Churchill discovered that he was able to lead a new kind of politics that was a politics of consensus.
I must say, Luke, some people are writing to us and they're making a comparison between Winston Churchill and our current Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, and perhaps one that's not favourable to our current Prime Minister. The calibre of our politicians, has it diminished or strengthened in your view?
I think it's diminished greatly, but I think it's also diminished since the 19th century considerably as well. We have had considerable figures in the 20th century, like Winston Churchill, like Margaret Thatcher, like, in his own way, also Clement Attlee as well. But it's certainly true that when we look at current politicians and we look at their ability to command status, to make inspiring speeches, to be able to perform decisive national actions, it looks pathetic in comparison to even later 20th century figures.
Is this a damning indictment of our place in the world as a country? I mean, I was talking to some people out in Silicon Valley not so long ago. And there's a question that goes round in Silicon Valley in the United States, which is, what would Napoleon do if he were alive today? Would he attempt to go up through the French army Or would he go and found an AI company? You know, something like that. And the conclusion that these sort of super tech nerds come to is that politics, especially politics in perhaps a European country today, is perhaps just not as significant a role as it was even 50 years ago.
Yes, and the role perhaps of an individual politician. If we believe that politics is essentially a system and that politicians like Rishi Sunak or Keir Starmer are the products of that system, backed behind obviously with a large civil service and with very restricted room to be able to pursue any form of political agenda, then who occupies office doesn't seem to have enormous consequence. Whereas the idea of a figure such as Margaret Thatcher or such as Clement Attlee becoming Prime Minister to really change the whole drumbeat of British politics, to be able to lead something significant, does seem something that is from a former age, and that is deeply dispiriting and disappointing. But I would never count out the possibility for someone, whether it's through a plan or whether it's through their own charisma, to come to the fore and become a new inspiring Prime Minister in the 21st century.
That's a very interesting point, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers and listeners will concur with that. Very difficult for politicians to be radical these days. Thank you very much, Luke Blaxill, Constitution historian. Thank you for talking us through all of that.
Now, we've been talking a lot about victory in Europe, but if you'd like some sunshine in Europe, here's the travel weather.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Whilst there's high pressure across the UK bringing largely settled weather here, it's a different story over more southern parts of Europe. A fairly potent feature is pushing into parts of the Canary Islands towards Madeira as well, bringing some wet and windy weather as we go towards the weekend. Elsewhere, a fair few showery bursts of rain around. We've had some heavy thunderstorms affecting Italy. They've now pushed their way a little bit further southwards, could cause some further issues, turning a little bit drier for many as we go through the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. That's State of the Nation every Monday and Tuesday at 8 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
So he can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m. weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there short and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
Because
the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes and Kerr weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop star to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Good afternoon. Britain has just gone 10-1. Now, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, has said that the highly anticipated UK-US trade agreement is a full and comprehensive one that will cement the relationship between the two countries for many years to come.
Well, he's certainly talking it up, isn't he, Tom?
He is.
Trump also posted that this should be a very big and exciting day for the United States and the United Kingdom.
Well, of course, the move follows the so-called Liberation Day announcement, which included 10% tariffs on UK goods and a 25% US import tariff on steel, aluminium and cars, including here in this country.
Well, joining us now with the latest is GB News political correspondent Catherine Forster. Catherine, Donald Trump very much talking up this deal. Do you suspect it will have a huge impact?
Well, look, I think this is a big win for the Prime Minister. The devil will be in the detail. Of course, the Prime Minister does not talk in the sort of language that Donald Trump uses. But look, we are the first country to get an agreement. I think this is a really big deal. Of course, the Prime Minister has faced quite a lot of criticism, hasn't he, for his decision to sort of take, as they would say, a calm and pragmatic approach, not criticise Donald Trump, cosy up to him. And then, of course, we had that Liberation Day where tariffs were slapped on everybody, including us. So, you know, was it going to pay off? But it seems like it is, because Donald Trump is saying that it is a great honour to have the UK as our first announcement. It feels like that special relationship that people often say isn't really special at all, maybe just is a little bit special. The lobby briefing earlier, my colleague Adam Cherry was in that. I don't think really we were expecting this announcement today, especially on the 80th anniversary of VE Day. They wouldn't be drawn upon that, but, you know, it does feel like a vindication for the Prime Minister and Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor, and they need it because they're pretty beleaguered at the moment. OK, we've got that trade deal with India the other day, but those local election results last week were absolutely dreadful for the government as well as the Conservatives. In terms of what's going to be in this deal, it's not going to be a sort of big, comprehensive, free trade deal, no matter what Donald Trump says. But it does sound like we will get some carve-outs potentially from some of the more damaging tariffs. The 10% across the board, that may well stay. But what we're hoping for is a dramatic reduction or even exemption from that 25% on cars, so damaging to our luxury car brands. And of course, the same for steel, a main reason why the government had to intervene in Scunthorpe just a few weeks ago. What might we have to give the United States in return? Well, let's see. But the digital services tax that the tech bros in the States dislike so much, it might be certainly severely reduced or possibly scrapped. And on food standards, well, the government has said that they are not going to lower food standards. They've said that's a red line. It sounds more like they want to align with the EU. Remember, we're hoping to get some sort of agreement with them in just a couple of weeks too. Worth saying, the opposition, Andrew Griffith, the shadow business secretary, has said this would be welcome and is another Brexit benefit.
OK, Catherine Forster, thank you very much indeed. You're on Westminster for us. Tom, just very quickly, I mean, how does this all fit with the whole EU reset? I mean, can it actually be this big deal if we're promising all of this to the European Union as well?
I think this deal could well be solely on tariffs, which is nice, good. Yeah. We like it. But ultimately, some of the biggest trade barriers between the UK and the US are non-tariff barrier. They're regulatory. And so if we sign up to EU regulations, which is likely on the 19th of this month, well, then we're not going to be able to get a further and more comprehensive deal with the United States. Because tariffs is nice, zero tariffs is good, but modern trade barriers are not about tariffs. It's mainly about whether you allow a type of product in. It's regulatory barriers.
Yeah, can we have our cake and eat it too? I'm not so sure, but stay with us. We're going to bring you more coverage on that, of course, going into Martin Daubney's show as well. But do stick around. We've got more on this very special day, 80 years since VE Day.
You could be the next big winner on the road in this brand new Alnag Baron 560 motorhome, courtesy of Marquis Leisure. Imagine the fun you could have in this luxurious home from home worth over £67,000. We'll also give you £5,000 in tax-free cash to make your next getaway a great one. And it could be all yours. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
Sunday with Michael Portillo from 11, only on GB News.
The Surrey Hills International Music Festival provides emerging artists with an opportunity to perform before audiences. It also champions accessibility and music education for primary school children. With me now to preview what audiences will hear is the chair of Surrey Hills International Music Festival, Julia Pearson. Julia, lovely to see you. Thank you for coming on GB News.
Thank you, Michael.
We're talking about a festival that takes place in May.
We are indeed, every May.
And Surrey Hills, what are the towns that are involved?
The Surrey Hills, in fact, occupies fully a quarter of the county, a quarter of Surrey. And it follows the chalk ridge from Farnham, above Guildford, Dorking, and on to Oxford. And the venues that we use are principally around the Guildford, Dorking areas of the Surrey Hills.
Are they, what, churches or concert halls or a bit of everything?
A little bit of everything, depending on the nature of the performers and what their needs are. So, for example, on the 6th of May, which is our opening concert, we have Betchworth Church, which is famous for 4 weddings and a funeral. So St Michael's Betchworth is the most beautiful church. That will be a performance space for the Hoody Menuhin School blistering students. We will also be using the West Horsley Place Stone Hall, which famously was inherited by Bamber Gascoigne, yes, and is an Elizabethan and Tudor building. And that opening concert will be with the London Consortium, who will be playing Elizabethan music from both the Elizabeth I and the period of Elizabeth II.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Well, a very good afternoon, Britain, to you. It's 1 o'clock on Thursday, the 8th of May. I'm Emily Carver.
And I'm Tom Harwood.
Well, after a week of celebrations, today does mark 80 years since victory in Europe.
At the end of nearly 60 years of war, when Nazi forces surrendered unconditionally to the Allies in that Second World War.
Hostilities will end officially at 1 minute after midnight tonight, Tuesday, the 8th of May.
Well, those are the famous words of Winston Churchill, the words that sparked people to take to the streets across Britain to celebrate.
Well, 80 years later, the spirit lives on. We're live around the country throughout this very special show today.
A special commemorative service is currently taking place inside Westminster Abbey. Behind me, the King and the Prince of Wales laid special wreaths on behalf of the nation and veterans.
We're here in Redcar, where the day started with a flag raising, a march and then a service this afternoon. We'll be speaking to a veteran very shortly about what VE Day 80 means to them.
here at Glasgow Cathedral, where the service here to commemorate VE Day 80 years on is about to begin. We'll be speaking with veterans across the afternoon who are here to celebrate and commemorate this big day.
Fantastic. And elsewhere on the show today, President Donald Trump, yes, he says this should be a very big and exciting day for both the United States and the UK as he gears up to unveil a highly anticipated trade deal with Britain. But just what can be expected? How far-reaching will it be? And will it be radical?
And over in Rome, we're on white smoke watch throughout the afternoon. We're expecting up to 4 cardinal votes today on who could be the next pope. Yes, this is the second day of this year's conclave. This morning's inconclusive votes yielded further black smoke from the Sistine Chapel chimney slightly earlier. Well, we'll bring you the very latest.
Lots of you have been getting in touch. You've been watching all the commemorative programme. Ian says, it's sad. At 12 o'clock, I stopped customers coming into my shop and we went and stood outside for 2 minutes. We were the only shop to do so and no other shoppers on the street paused for a moment. Such a shame. What do you make of that?
I wonder if they knew. I wonder if they knew that there was a 2-minute silence, if they would.
But should people know? This is what I worry about, you know, the loss of our collective sense of history and the loss of those days. Because Luke Blacksey, our historian there, said it's more important to know the generalities, you know, what happened, rather than the days themselves. But I'm not sure if I agree, actually. I think it's almost as important to continue to mark those days, otherwise they won't be marked. And then we will have lost that tradition, lost that, you know, historical tradition that, you know, doing something collectively is so important, I think, particularly in a fractious society.
To an extent, but I mean, to some extent, on the other hand, there is this idea that the way that we learn about history sometimes can just be rote reciting dates with no deeper understanding of what that means. And so if people know that the 8th of May is VE Day, great, well done, big tick. But what I would prefer is that people knew what that meant. What the country
still have to know it was VE Day, wouldn't they?
For. I don't necessarily know. I mean, I know that D-Day is the 6th of June. I don't think everyone needs to know that D-Day was on that particular date. I would rather that they knew that D-Day happened and that Americans, Canadians and Brits crossed the English Channel after a brilliant scheme of deception and were able to take back the continent across the course of the next year. I mean, that to me is a more important narrative truth than the specific date on which it occurred.
I just think it's going to be a struggle to keep that collective sense of history alive as the generations, because obviously we have people in this country from all over the world, and it is important to have that kind of sense of social cohesion, and marking days like this and other days is really, really important for that, I think. Anyway, gbnews.com/your say, but yes, a bit of understanding of why is also very important. But let's get to the headlines with Sophia.
Very good afternoon. It's 4 minutes past 1. These are your latest headlines. The top story, the US president says the US-UK trade agreement is a full and comprehensive one that will cement the relationship between the two countries. On social media, President Donald Trump earlier hinted at a trade deal with a big and highly respected country, later on saying it was a great honour to announce the UK as their first trade deal. Shortly after these reports emerged, the value of the British sterling rose by 0.4% against the US dollar. The move follows President Trump's so-called Liberation Day announcement, which included 10% tariffs on UK goods and a 25% US import tax on steel, aluminium and cars. Speaking at the London Defence Conference this morning, Sir Keir Starmer said he would always act in our national interest and deliver security and renewal for our country. Earlier, GB News spoke to the Secretary of State for Defence, John Healey.
The United States is absolutely our closest economic and national security ally, and ever since Keir Starmer in February was in the White House, we've been looking to negotiate an economic deal with the US.
Now, the Bank of England has cut interest rates to to 4.25%. It's the fourth time interest rates have been cut in this current cycle. The cut was anticipated as the threat of an escalating global trade war looms and the economic growth outlook worsens. Some economists have warned that UK growth could slow sharply over the next 2 years because of Mr Trump's plans, which will directly impact British exporters, but also could weaken spending among households and businesses. Millions of lives lost, homes, cities and families destroyed, but all remembered today for the 80th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day. Allied forces celebrate the surrender document signed in Berlin by the Nazis to mark the end of World War II. Westminster Abbey hosts the VE Day service this afternoon, with the King and Queen alongside other royals and politicians all in attendance. A national 2-minute silence took place at midday today to commemorate the anniversary and to remember and thank those who fought for our freedom. Now, British Steel is recruiting workers for the first time since the government stepped in to rescue the business. The company's announced it's hiring more than 180 new employees as it prepares to ramp up production. They hope this will significantly increase iron and steel production, with the new jobs advertised in Scunthorpe, Teesside and Skinninggrove. Migrants may have to learn English to a higher standard in order to work in the UK. Under the measures, migrants would be required to have the equivalent of a foreign language A-level standard of English rather than the GCSE standard currently required. An immigration white paper set to be published next week is expected to set out the reforms as Sir Keir Starmer gets tougher on migration in the wake of Labour's local election losses. Another round of voting this morning and another display of black smoke rising from the Sistine Chapel following the second secret vote of the Conclave. A group of 133 cardinals electors began their behind-closed-doors meeting yesterday afternoon. Up to 4 rounds of voting can take place each day, with 2 in the morning and 2 in the afternoon. A new pope requires a 2/3 majority in the voting, and then white smoke will be emitted from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel to confirm when a pontiff has been chosen. And finally, natural historian and broadcaster Sir David Attenborough celebrates his 99th birthday today. King Charles attended the world premiere of his new documentary film, Ocean with David Attenborough, at Royal Festival Hall earlier this week, ahead of the film's release into cinemas today. Now, the Prince of Wales has praised Sir David Attenborough's dedication to the planet in a personal tribute, wishing him a happy 99th birthday and reiterating that no matter how hard-hitting the message is, Sir David Attenborough always leaves us with a sense of hope and optimism. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More from me in half an hour, but now it's back to Emily and Tom.
Good afternoon, Britain. At 9 minutes past 1, we've got some breaking news now, as the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson has been speaking exclusively to Patrick Christys on GB News, taking credit for the UK-US trade deal. Well, let's take a look.
So are you responsible for this, then?
Well, no, I'm not, no. But Brexit certainly is.
Right. What is it, by the way, first? What is it?
Brexit is certainly responsible because we wouldn't have been able to do this deal individually with the United States if we weren't outside the European Union. That's for ding dang sure.
Well, there you go. There's more of that interview tonight. It looks like it's going to be a fun one.
You can be ding-dang sure of it.
Ding-dang sure of it. OK, so he didn't personally take credit. In fact, he refused to personally take credit for it. But Brexit is what's responsible, in Boris Johnson's view, for this US-UK trade deal, although we haven't seen the terms and conditions, the small print yet, have we?
No, we haven't, although it is
haven't seen anything yet.
Completely true, though. As an EU member state, you can't control your own tariff schedules. So clearly, tariffs are what this deal is focusing on. And Brexit did give us control over our own tariffs.
Yeah, I should say. Just Patrick got up very early for this interview, drove over to Oxbridge to see Boris Johnson, so it should be a good one. You should watch it.
Yeah. Well, it looks like a really interesting backdrop. Do you know where they were? What was the sort of venue?
I don't want to get it wrong.
OK.
But it definitely has something to do with VE Day and the celebrations and the commemorations marking today. But you can find out, and perhaps I'll find out. You can watch the full interview with Boris Johnson tonight on Patrick Christys' programme, which will be here on GB News at 9 o'clock.
We're going to cut live to Westminster Abbey now, where His Majesty the King is just leaving a service there, and the Queen is following him, getting into their royal automobile. The King does like his classic cars, doesn't he? Really quite beautiful scenes there. But there, the King, last in, first out.
Yes, so that was the service at Westminster Abbey, which was attended by all sorts, of course, veterans, politicians, former politicians, the head of state, of course, other members of the royal family. And I believe we can speak to our royal correspondent, Cameron Walker, who's there in Westminster for us. Cameron, the service was about 1 hour long. What happened inside the Abbey?
Yeah, it was an incredibly poignant service, Emily. As you can probably imagine, lots of veterans inside that building, joined by senior members of the royal family, of course, including the King and Queen, who you just saw on your screens leaving. In the next few moments, we are expecting the Prince and Princess of Wales to leave too. The Prime Minister inside, Sir Keir Starmer, gave a Bible reading from Matthew 5, and a wartime favourite, The White Cliffs of Dover, was also sung by a professional singer as well. The great-great-grandson of Sir Winston Churchill, Alexander Churchill, who's just 10 years old. He lit the candle of peace and also delivered a short prayer to the congregation. This happening as other young people were represented at the service and handed white roses to veterans from that wartime era. Of course, white roses are a symbol of peace, and it is that link, isn't it, between the young generation and, of course, that older generation who gave so much for our freedom, because of course 80 years ago today, since victory in Europe took place, the Allies' defeat of Nazi Germany, the Prince of Wales and the the Prince of Wales and the King even laid 2 wreaths at the tomb of the unknown warrior. The King laying his wreath on behalf of the nation, the Prince of Wales laying his wreath on behalf of veterans and the wartime generation. There were also lots of volunteer organisations inside the congregation, including the Scouts, St John Ambulance and cadets as well. So lots of different people being represented, politicians of all stripes, lots of different political parties were inside that building, putting their political differences aside and emphasising unity. There was also a number of former Prime Ministers in the congregation, including former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, David Cameron, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss as well. As I said, the Labour Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer delivered a reading at that service. Of course, at the start of the service, a 2-minute silence took place. The Prince of Wales and the Princess of Wales just making their way towards their car there at the end of this service. The 3 children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte and Prince Louis, not accompanying them because they are, of course, at school, because it is a school day. The Prince of Wales just shaking hands there, and the Princess just shaking hands there with the Dean of Westminster, I believe. From my position, I think that's who it is. And they're just entering their car. Of course, the Prince and Princess were also here on Monday for that special fly-past and military procession alongside the King and Queen. We don't expect them to be at the concert at the Horse Guards Parade tonight, the Prince and Princess of Wales, but sometimes they do surprise us, so we'll wait and see. The royal car, the Range Rover, just sweeping past our position now with a massive police escort. This entire area of Westminster, Tom and Emily, has been shut down to the public, although there are crowds around in the side streets trying to get a glimpse of members of the royal family. I'm told the reason why this whole area has been shut down is because the politicians actually walked from Parliament, the Houses of Parliament, down the road here to Broad Sanctuary to the Palace of Westminster. So for security reasons, that's why the entire area has been shut down, because you have very senior politicians walking on the public road.
And that is a beautiful reflection of what happened in 1945, when Winston Churchill himself led all parliamentarians out of the House of Commons, down the road without as much security as we see today, and into Westminster Abbey for the service. And he did that so impromptu, without expectation, that they didn't adjourn the House of Commons. And what that meant was that Hansard, the people who sort of transcribe the goings-on in Parliament, well, because Parliament wasn't adjourned, they didn't stop transcribing. So the transcribers came with all the politicians and came into Westminster Abbey, and that entire service is in the parliamentary Hansard, as if it was a continuation of the session of Parliament. So I wonder if that is sort of reflecting, reminding ourselves of what happened 80 years ago when Winston Churchill led that procession.
Yeah, and we're certainly seeing a lot of things play out as it did back 80 years ago, Tom and Emily. Of course, just a couple of days delayed because of the bank holiday, but we saw members of the royal family, didn't we, on that balcony at Buckingham Palace on Monday. Of course, Sir Winston Churchill joining them on that balcony 80 years ago. But today, of course, as I said, his grandson, great-great-grandson even, Alexander Churchill, inside that congregation. But it is bittersweet, really, isn't it? Because this is the first major commemoration of victory in Europe 80 years on, where there isn't a member of the royal family in living memory who were on that balcony as the crowds gathered outside Buckingham Palace cheering and shouting, "We want the King." The Duke of Kent, who was inside the service, that's Queen Elizabeth II's first cousin, grandson of King Edward V. He was alive during the on Victory in Europe Day 80 years ago. He was just under 10 years old, we think, 9 or 10 years old, I believe. But of course, he was not in the balcony because he was still a child. He was not a working member of the royal family. But of course, Tom and Emily, the memory lives on, and I think that is certainly a theme that we have seen throughout the service here this afternoon, and indeed during the military procession on Monday.
Really poignant that the Bible reading from the Prime Minister was Matthew 5. This is the Sermon on the Mount. This is perhaps the most famous teaching of Jesus. This is "Blessed are the peacemakers." This is "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." And how poignant that is as a worldview of the Anglosphere, of Britain, which of course for a time stood alone against Nazi Germany, comparing sort of what we believe in our moral values in this country compared to the Nazis, which are about exterminating the weak. The Nazi ideology of expunging society from the undesirables, about, completely, this almost Spartan view of life. Those who are strong survive and everyone else to the death camps. I mean, what a profound contrast when you have the Prime Minister talking about how it is the meek who are perhaps the most blessed, for they shall inherit the earth. Talking about those words, as Matthew describes Jesus having said, that completely different moral framework, that Judeo-Christian framework, that whether you are religious or irreligious certainly governs the way we in this country think about the world, and a reminder that not every society or regime has always had that kind of viewpoint towards the meek or less strong in society.
Well, of course, Tom, and I think the emphasis over this afternoon has certainly been on unity rather than division. It was a deeply Christian service, an Anglican service, of course. King Charles, head of the Church of England, Supreme Governor of the Church of England. And as I said, it was politicians from all stripes, as Winston Churchill led them 80 years ago, who walked side by side into this service, reflecting on what's great about Britain, and also and celebrating how 80 years ago people had fought for our freedoms and defeated Nazism and that division which you so eloquently put there. And I think it was very poignant that we had, 50-odd World War II veterans and volunteers who are still alive, who are eyewitnesses to that key event in history inside the Abbey here today, alongside the King, the Prince of Wales and other senior members of the royal family and the Prime Minister, giving thanks to what took place 80 years ago, but also inviting the next generation along to ensure that their memories are never forgotten and certainly live on.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Cameron Walker, our royal correspondent there outside Westminster Abbey, following all the people who've been coming in and out, including the royal family, of course, but many high-profile politicians, not least the Prime Minister.
Yes, indeed. Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News, and we've got more reaction from around the country to VE Day and this 80th anniversary.
And you can also get full coverage of the proposed UK-US trade deal and President Trump's announcement that's coming at 3 o'clock this afternoon. That will be live on Martin Daubney's show. He'll be sure to bite through all the detail with a fine-tooth comb and find all the terms and conditions and what exactly this is. Trump, of course, is saying it is a comprehensive trade deal. Is it? Find out then.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff.
Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood.
So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What is the state of our economy? What is the state of our National Health Service? What is the state of our schools?
What on earth is going on?
Understanding Britain means understanding the state we are in. This is State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays from 8 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop star to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Well, good afternoon, Britain. It's 24 minutes past 1, and all day today we are celebrating 80 years since victory in Europe. Yes, once Britain stood alone, then, of course, allies joined the fight. And eventually, after 5.5 years of war, we pushed Nazism back until Hitler shot himself in the head.
Yes, and do keep getting in touch about your experiences. Perhaps you have family members, parents, grandparents who did fight in the war, who did give their life to service, and do let us know as well. Also, lots of you have been getting in touch about your experience of the 2-minute silence today. Lots of you saying that people did stop still and mark that 2-minute silence. One council worker turned off his lawnmower for 2 minutes to stand there and just mark the occasion, which is rather nice.
Really rather nice.
I don't know where that was, though. You just tell me exactly where it is.
Do get in touch.
Anyway, we are going to go to Anna Riley. That's enough of me. Anna Riley, who's in Redcar, seaside town on the Yorkshire coast. Anna, thank you very much indeed. Anna, who are you with?
Good afternoon to you both. Well, I'm joined by Malcolm Patterson. He is a Royal Navy veteran. Malcolm, you've been here throughout the day. It started with a flag raising, then we had a march through to the area that we're in now. We had readings, we had the flag raising, we had poppy laying, and then we had a fantastic choir on as well, and a huge crowd, children, old and young, joining together. It's been brilliant. Just tell us about what VE Day means to you, especially 80 years on.
Well, I don't remember the actual VE Day because I was only 2.5, but to me, these sort of things are Britain at its greatest moment. We need to keep it going, and the more that we get involved and the more we bring the children into it and let them realise just how great Britain once was, and I truly believe can be again. Tonight we've got there's a continuation around about 6 o'clock where we're lighting candles for the veterans and the people that died from the Redcar area. So we're lighting little candles, and there isn't a lake there anymore, but we're actually going to sort something out, and so everybody that died in this area will be remembered.
Yeah, that 2-minute silence that we had, that sombre moment, what was going through your mind?
Yeah, I just think back and really the way things were, and some of my mates that I served with, and I'm sure the other veterans would have been thinking like that as well, because although the major war, we haven't had major wars as they were saying, but we still had 2 lots of Iraq and Afghanistan, and lots of fine young men and women have lost their lives in those campaigns, and they shouldn't be forgotten ever. I'm very, very, as you can probably tell, emotional and patriotic, and I'm glad I'm that way. I'm just proud to be British.
And you were saying earlier as well how important you think it is for the younger generation to carry on this tradition when this great generation have gone.
Absolutely, because they're the future. They're what Britain is all about. But they need to, and they always will remember what's great about Britain, as long as we don't let our traditions die. Things like this should be taught in schools. I'm very patriotic about that. I don't like the fact that we seem to be losing a lot of our history. We are British, and we should be absolutely proud of being British. End of.
And you were saying as well that the things have changed, the recruitment in the armed forces compared to when you started serving in 1959, how numbers have dropped, and you're hoping that you get more recruitment.
Well, I don't know what the numbers were when I actually joined in 1959, but when I came out in 1970, we were looking at our naval force of about 140,000 guys. I think we're down to about between 30 and 40,000 now. That's the Navy. We've got an army which was 70,000 now. When I came out with the reserves, it was 250,000. These guys and these people are just irreplaceable. The RAF, we had fighter planes, we just got nothing now compared with what we had. And our forces need to be rebuilt. And we need to treat our guys, if you're going to recruit guys, the governments, one government after another come in and say that they want to recruit and they want to get guys in, well, pay them more. They're putting their lives on the line. They should be paid what they deserve. They shouldn't just be left to, I mean, some of the wages that are on now probably are like what the labourer would get on a building site. Well, he's not putting his life on the line, so why aren't the wages and the conditions to suit? That's the way I see it anyway.
Thank you so much for joining us, Malcolm, and speaking to us. I'll let you get your fish and chips.
That's all right. And I'd just like to say that I'm a great GB News watcher. I think you're doing a fantastic job, and you have done for the last 4 years, and May you long continue.
Thank you, Malcolm. Really appreciate that.
My pleasure. Bye-bye.
Malcolm Patterson there, giving his views on VE Day and lots of other interesting topics. Certainly a man that's proud to be British.
Absolutely. We like Malcolm here in the studio. Thank you very much for bringing us that interview, and I hope you get some fish and chips as well. Well, there you go. Proud to be British. Wants the younger generation to be proud as him to be British, and wants veterans and soldiers and people in the military to be paid a little more.
Yeah. And
you can understand why. It can be a pittance, can't it?
You certainly can. But also, what a moment to remember the history of this country. I mean, what other country in the world has as deep, as long, as profound, as transformational a history as Great Britain? I mean, what other country?
Why are we always doing our country down, then? I mean, of course, not here at GB News and not us. I was always taught to be proud of my country. But, you know, elsewhere, kids seem to be taught that there's nothing special about Britain. And if there is something special about Britain, it's all the awful things.
I mean,
you know?
It's worth remembering that in 1940, you know, France had fallen. And across the entire... not just Europe, but the Eurasian landmass. You know, Japan on one side, Portugal on the other. Across that entire stretch of the earth, you had one form or other of tyrannical, dictatorial, totalitarian government. And Britain...
Yeah, good point.
Britain alone stood free, stood against that tyranny, that Nazi-Soviet pact of tyranny.
You can't suggest, Tom, that we're exceptional in any way, can you? Because that would be rude to other countries.
It would be rude to other countries to note that we haven't been invaded for 1,000 years successfully.
Yeah, we're very unique as a nation. Anyway, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News, just musing away there. Lots more coming up on today's show. Yes, Donald Trump says this should be a very big and exciting day for the United States and the United Kingdom as he gears up to unveil this highly anticipated trade deal with Britain.
And, of course, you can get full coverage of that from 3 p.m. today. That's 10 a.m. over in the United States when Donald Trump is expected to make that announcement. What is in this deal? And we should be expecting to hear from Sir Keir Starmer just a bit after that.
Oh, yes. Will there be any surprises for our Prime Minister? Hopefully not. We're also going to have the latest from Vatican City as the conclave continues. There's live pictures. We've already seen black smoke this morning. But what shall the afternoon bring? Will there be white smoke? All of that and so much more on this very busy day after the headlines with Sophia Hill.
Emily, Tom, thank you. A very good afternoon. It's 33 minutes past 1. These are your latest headlines. We start with the top story of the day. The US president says that the US-UK trade agreement is a full and comprehensive one that will cement the relationship between the two countries. On social media, President Donald Trump earlier hinted at a trade deal with a big and highly respected country, later on saying it was a great honour to announce the UK as their first trade deal. Shortly after these reports emerged, the value of the British sterling rose by 0.4% against the US dollar. The move follows President Trump's so-called Liberation Day announcement, which included 10% tariffs on UK goods and a 25% US import tax on steel, aluminium and cars. In a speech at the London Defence Conference this morning, Sir Keir Starmer said he would always act in our national interest and deliver security and renewal for our country. Earlier, GB News spoke to the Secretary of State for Defence, John Healey.
The United States is absolutely our closest economic and national security ally, and ever since Keir Starmer in February was in the White House, we've been looking to negotiate an economic deal with the US.
And former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, speaking exclusively to GB News, has taken credit for the trade deal, saying it could only have happened because of Brexit.
Yes. So are you responsible for this, then?
Well, no, I'm not, no. But Brexit certainly is.
Right. What is it, by the way? First? What is it?
Brexit is certainly responsible because we wouldn't have been able to do this deal individually with the United States if we weren't outside the European Union. That's for ding dang sure.
Watch the full interview with Boris Johnson tonight at 9 p.m. on GB News during Patrick Christie's Tonight. And the Bank of England has cut interest rates to 4.25%. It's the fourth time interest rates have been cut in the current cycle. The cut was anticipated as the threat of an escalating global trade war looms and the economic growth outlook worsens. Some economists have warned that UK economic growth could slow sharply over the next 2 years because of Mr Trump's plans, which will directly impact British exporters, but could also weaken spending among households and businesses. And millions of lives lost, homes, cities, families destroyed, all remembered today for the 80th anniversary of Victory Day in Europe. Allied forces celebrate the surrender document signed in Berlin by the Nazis to mark the end of World War II. Westminster Abbey held the VE Day service this afternoon with the King and Queen alongside other royals and politicians, all in attendance. A 2-minute national silence took place at midday to commemorate the anniversary and to remember and thank those who fought for our freedom. Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Here's a quick snapshot of today's markets. The pound will buy you $1.333 and €1.117. The price of gold is £2,513.98 per ounce, and the FTSE 100's at 8,577 points.
My Claim Group sponsors the GB News Finance Report.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be a dry day ahead, plenty of sunny spells, though that cloud sticking around for some. But where you do see the sunshine, it is going to be feeling warm. That's away from the east, though. The reason for the dry, settled weather is because we do have high pressure building across the country, but it's also dragging in a northeasterly flow. So more cloud feeding into eastern areas, a bit more of a breeze here. So that's just going to add on to a bit of a chill for the day. But many areas dry, settled, plenty of sunny spells, particularly across the west and across the far south. And it should be feeling warm in that sunshine too. Highs around 18 to 19 degrees Celsius, but across eastern areas temperatures only reaching around the mid-teens, so feeling a little bit chilly in that breeze. To finish off the day across Scotland, once again it should remain mostly dry. We'll see a mix of cloud and some clearer skies to finish off the day, and it's going to be fairly similar across Northern Ireland and northern parts of England. Some patchy cloud and also some clearer skies. Fairly similar once again elsewhere across England or Wales. There's still a fair amount of cloud lingering on across central parts of England. As we finish off the evening and head through the overnight period, it's not much change really, staying dry, a mix of cloud and clear skies, but a chance we could start to see some mist and fog develop by the time we reach the morning. And where we see the clearest of skies, temperatures are soon going to be slipping away. It's likely to be a chillier night compared to last night, possibly even seeing some frost by the morning, though this should be fairly isolated. So a chilly start, any mist and fog clearing quite readily, and once again it's going to be a dry, settled day. It's likely there's going to be more sunshine around if you compare it to this afternoon, particularly across central areas where the cloud is set to linger on Thursday. That's away from the northwest though, more clouds spilling in here, possibly some light outbreaks of rain by the afternoon, but otherwise feeling much warmer, particularly across eastern areas, highs of around 21 degrees Celsius.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. The M90 near Broxton roundabout is restricted due to a broken down vehicle. The A465 is closed from Dowlais Top to CFN Coed with diversions. The A19 in Middlesbrough has one lane open due to a collision. A broken down vehicle on the M11 between junctions 11 and 10 causes delays. The A27 is congested between the A270 Brighton East and the junction with the A23. And on the trains, Avanti West Coast and TransPennine Express report disruptions between Oxenholme Lake District and Carlisle. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's almost 20 to 2 and a very happy VE Day. In fact, we're going to cross live to just outside Westminster Abbey now, where, of course, there's been a VE Day service. And one of the individuals inside Westminster Abbey for that service is Warrant Officer Scott Drinkle. Scott, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon. Just first, your reflections on the service that you've just left.
It was incredibly poignant, probably more so than I gave credit for, to be honest. The solemnity and just the air of respect that was within was just palpable. It was really a privilege to be a part of it.
And you were among many military people, servicemen and women who were invited along to this service, and of course veterans too from the Second World War.
That's correct. I've seen a few as we've been walking around and walking through the Abbey itself. The volume of serving military personnel and obviously those veterans has been incredibly impressive on such a significant day.
And people have been commenting throughout the course of this day how, to some extent, this is going to be the last significant anniversary, the last moment in time when we can really pass on our thanks to that generation, but also they can pass on their experiences to the next generation.
Very much so. We have been losing first-hand knowledge so much recently, and it's going to come to the next generations, those who have an interest, those who have engaged with those veterans, to obtain that knowledge and hopefully pass it on, so we can still learn the lessons that they've been able to give us the space to be able to maximise.
And Scott, we were talking a little bit earlier about Winston Churchill's great-great-grandson. He had a pretty big role to play, didn't he, in the service? Did he come across very nicely? We weren't there.
He came across as a particularly well-versed young man. He lit the candle of remembrance and also had a small speaking part within there, but it was carried out with such confidence. Yes, I think he's a very self-assured young man.
Well, excellent stuff. And Scott, just finally, do you have a message for people watching at home, perhaps for people thinking, well, what do we tell the next generation? How do we keep this flame of remembrance, but also this memory of victory alive?
There is so much that people can do just by passing on the lessons that we've learned. I also volunteer with the Commonwealth War Graves Commission. There's opportunities to actually indulge in different little parts of interest. Just urge people to go out and do that, and by doing it you're actually spreading that word around, and all we can do is just try and keep that flame going.
OK, well, thank you so much for taking the time this afternoon to speak to us on GB News. Warrant Officer Scott Drinkle, thank you very much indeed. Well, there you go, a little bit of an insight into what was going on in Westminster Abbey and just how much it means to people who are serving in the military.
Absolutely, and of course we're talking about victory in Europe, but if you'd like some sunshine in Europe, here's the weather forecast.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
Whilst there's high pressure across the UK bringing largely settled weather here, it's a different story over more southern parts of Europe. A fairly potent feature is pushing into parts of the Canary Islands towards Madeira as well, bringing some wet and windy weather as we go towards the weekend. Elsewhere, a fair few showery bursts of rain around. We've had some heavy thunderstorms affecting Italy. They've now pushed their way a little bit further southwards, could cause some further issues, turning a little bit drier for many as we go through the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's our passion, you know, health and fitness is our passion. And we was always telling the people we were doing the workouts for, get the kids involved, you know, build the healthy habits into them at an early age, and they stand a way better chance, you know, you sticking to it
on with them
adult
later on in life,
At what age do you get to work with them?
They're anything from the age of sort of 9 to about 12 at the minute.
Tell the viewers a little bit about Jacob, his story, how you've been helping him.
So Jacob had been getting bullied, and he even quit his local football team as well due to name calling. And he knew we were into boxing, and he wanted to give training a bit of a go. So we took him under our wing and started doing a bit of boxing with him, playing a bit of football, just getting him moving and getting him a bit more active.
Getting him off the screen.
Yeah.
He had a bad gaming habit, you know, and he would spend all his time in his room, sort of on his you know, devices. So our focus was to get him out and get him active. I mean, the bullying stopped. He's lost a lot of weight. I mean, it was never about the weight loss for us. It was just getting him confident again. Our aim is to get him back to playing football soon.
And is the bullying stopped because they think he's fit enough now, he could whack him back if they...
I think it stopped because he's with us. You know?
So what do you do with these kids? How do you get them to lose this weight?
So it's physical activities. So Jacob doesn't like boxing, really. He likes football, so we're doing football with him. With Spencer, it's mainly talking to him because he's fairly active, but his parents describe him as a little bit hot-headed. He suffers a bit of autism, and you know he gets a bit angry with situations when plans change last minute. So it's talking to him really and finding what activities they like, and with the diet, they've got to eat clean.
The People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Well, it was great to speak to that warrant officer. Welcome back. It's 1:47 in the afternoon. Get a little bit of an insight into how much these services at Westminster Abbey really mean. But let's speak to a military historian, Peter Caddick-Adams, who joins us now. Of course, marking 80 years since VE Day, a momentous occasion. I mean, we've been celebrating all week, and the celebrations will continue into the weekend. And we were just talking about Melton Mowbray. Yes, they had a street party, but they've got huge celebrations this weekend, talking about tens of thousands of people all descending on Melton Mowbray to celebrate our country, essentially, and our victory so many years ago. I mean, what does it mean to you?
Well, you wisely placed yourself all over the United Kingdom, so you've got a reaction from everywhere. For me as a historian, it's quite interesting to see how there was a lovely story that John Major gave over the radio this morning about his time as a Prime Minister and having so many veterans on hand. What it means to me is that we as communicators have an enormous responsibility because the few veterans that are left will not be with us for much longer. And they're handing the torch to us of their memories and their experiences, whether they were in uniform or not. And it's up to us to hand that on to other generations, to make it relevant and important to the culture of the nation. And that can only be done if we do our jobs effectively. And so this is where we are now on alert, because they won't be around now.
It gives an entirely new meaning to that old Churchillian phrase, never in the field of human conflict has so much been owed by so many to so few.
And the few now are the veterans who are left. And most events even national ones struggle to get 30 or 40 veterans who were around at the time to be present and to offer up their memories. So, I mean, it's hugely poignant. And I was just going through all the papers this morning, and they, you know, there's veteran stories everywhere, and I'll be saving them and probably writing another book about them. But that's it. And you know, the 85th and the 90th won't be anything like the same, even though we get school children to write projects on them. But let me put you out of your misery, because you're
yes,
wondering
ask about this.
where Boris Johnson was a little earlier. So that is at RAF Uxbridge, the former RAF Uxbridge, where there's a command bunker, which was where the Battle of Britain was coordinated for. In southeast England. It's called the Number 11 Group Bunker. It's a museum you can book and go and see it. And it's also, it played a role in the film The Battle of Britain. So there's big map tables and all sorts of clocks and lit up gadgetry that you could see behind.
It looked like Boris Johnson and Patrick Christie's there were coming up with some great strategy.
Yeah, perfect place for him. But I mean, perfect to feature on VE Day itself.
But about Winston Churchill and his memory, sorry, Tom, about Winston Churchill, now, has there been quite a lot of revisionism? I know there's this debate that is raging in modern times as to whether Winston Churchill was the man that we believe he was. Lots of people saying awful things about him, saying he was a racist, a bigot, not a good man. I mean, how do you protect the history of an iconic Prime Minister such as Winston Churchill?
Well, I'm so glad you asked me that, and I'm very remiss, because I've just written a book about Winston Churchill, and I should have brought it with me. There's a bit of revisionism, but there always is with historical people these days. That's the mood and the era we're going through. Iconoclasm. We set these people up, and they need a bit of tinkering with to bring them a bit more down to size, really to make them more understandable, make them more human. So, yes, he is. I think once a century, someone comes along and fishes their nation out of deep trouble. And for us in the 20th century, it was Winston Churchill. There was going to be no one else. He had a unique skill set. He had done what he did in the First World War at cabinet level. So he understood the mechanics of how you lead a nation in war. And Lloyd George, the First World War Prime Minister, was his great friend, and he was a cabinet minister, Winston Churchill himself. So when the Second World War came along, he knew what he needed to do. I mean, had the war not happened, then he would not have become Prime Minister.
And it is so important to note what a lone voice, to some extent, he was throughout the 1930s and then into the initial war cabinet. I mean, had he not become Prime Minister, had it gone to Hailsham or anyone else, we would have signed terms.
Well, the Earl of Halifax, rather. We may well have done, in which case you and I would still be here doing this interview, but in German, which doesn't bear thinking about.
No.
But today we're celebrating the fact that we're doing this in English. And without that event of the 10th of May 1940, we wouldn't have got the 8th of May 1945. Now, we've got to be careful, because we keep talking about victory in the end of the Second World War. This isn't. This is victory in Europe. This is victory in Western Europe for the Western Allies. The Soviets want a second surrender document signed in Berlin, which they do in the early hours of the 9th of May. So the 9th of May is victory in Europe for what becomes the Eastern Europe and the Cold War.
Well, that's an important point to highlight. We're going to have to leave it there because we've run to the end, but we could speak about this for the rest of the show, couldn't we? Peter Caddick-Adams there, military historian. Thank you very much.
Yeah, and it's so worth remembering that, yes, it was victory and peace for Western Europe, but Eastern Europe remained under a form of totalitarianism for another 40 years.
Yes, we've got a lot more coming up as well. We're going to be discussing the UK-US trade deal that President Trump is going to announce at 3 o'clock. What exactly will be in there? How far-reaching will it be? Will it be comprehensive or not so much?
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good afternoon. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. As we head over the next few days, there's going to be lots of sunshine. Feeling warm in the sunshine too, though a little chilly overnight, particularly under clear skies. And the reason for all this settled weather, well, it's all thanks to an area of high pressure swirling its way around across the UK, but at times this has dragged in a northeasterly flow, so it's felt a little chilly across eastern areas, and it'll feel a little chilly overnight too, particularly under clear skies. We may even see some mist and fog by the time we reach the morning, and possibly even some rural frost, but for many staying largely dry, a mix of cloud and clearer skies. Some temperatures just dipping below freezing, but for many areas remaining in the mid to low single figures. So to start then, for Friday across Scotland, it's going to be dry. Like I said, there is going to be some mist and fog potentially, particularly across valleys and rural spots, but overall dry, perhaps just some cloud starting to creep into the very far northwest. And fairly similar across Northern Ireland, northern parts of England, a dry and bright start once any mist and fog clears, and similar elsewhere across England and Wales, a chilly but dry and bright start for most. And then through much of the day as high pressure sticks around, once again remaining dry, plenty of sunshine, wall-to-wall sunshine in some spots, particularly across central areas where this afternoon it's been fairly cloudy. But across the far northwest, some more clouds starting to spill in, possibly even some light outbreaks of rain later into the afternoon. But for most, a dry, settled day and feeling a lot warmer, particularly across eastern areas, highs reaching around 21 degrees. So a much warmer day across eastern areas, and for all, a dry, warm, pleasant afternoon. Into the evening, we'll see fairly similar conditions, a mix of cloud and clearer skies. And the dry, settled weather continues as we head over into the weekend. Just need to keep an eye on Sunday, the potential for thunderstorms across the south, but otherwise plenty of warm sunshine to come.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be the next big winner on the road in this brand new Alnag Baron 560 motorhome, courtesy of Marquis Leisure. Imagine the fun you could have in this luxurious home from home worth over £67,000. We'll also give you £5,000 in tax-free cash to make your next getaway a great one. And it could be all yours. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, and as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/yoursay. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
No matter the state it's in, this is our nation. Join me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, for a genuine, honest discussion on where we have been, where we are going, and where we are with the people who set the direction. That's State of the Nation every Monday and Tuesday at 8 o'clock, only on GB News, the People's Channel.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight-talking show where all voices are heard.
And, you know, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
Good afternoon, Britain. It is, of course, 2 o'clock on the 8th of May, VE Day.
Yes, we're looking back on 80 years since that fateful day and the celebrations and commemorations that have been taking place, not just in the capital, but across the country.
Hostilities will end officially at 1 minute after midnight tonight, Tuesday, the 8th of May.
Well, elsewhere on the show today, we are going to be discussing President Donald Trump, of course, but also we've got reporters across the country, including Cameron Walker, our royal correspondent in Westminster.
And very shortly, I'm going to be joined by the great-grandson and the great-great-grandson of Sir Winston Churchill, live here outside Westminster Abbey.
Well, much like the rest of the United Kingdom, here in Wrexham, they are commemorating and celebrating 80 years of sacrifice, 80 years of peace, 80 years of freedom in Europe.
Here on the Shankle Road in Belfast, the bunting is from every single lamppost. Most shops are done up with their windows in VE Day. They're ahead of a big parade here at 6 o'clock. Even the 40s music is playing. We'll have more later.
Fantastic stuff. Of course, elsewhere, we're on white smoke watch throughout the afternoon as cardinals are voting on the second day of the Conclave. This morning's inconclusive votes yielded further black smoke from the Sistine Chapel chimney slightly earlier. Well, we'll bring you the very latest throughout the course of the afternoon.
Well, thank you for joining us this afternoon on this special day. Helen's got in touch. Helen, you've asked us to mention your husband's uncle. His name was Kenneth Johnson, Duke of Wellington Regiment. He died on the 14th of February 1944 in Anzio at the age of just 19. Well, there you go, a personal story from you, Helen, and your husband.
It is so poignant.
At 19 years old.
Looking at war graves, and I've been to war graves in France and in Belgium a fair few times. And one of the most poignant things, beyond seeing just the row after row of headstones, is looking at the ages on those headstones. So often, you know, 18 years old, 19 years old, 20 years old, just headstone after headstone after headstone.
I just hope we never have to face such a thing again in this country, and that we keep the peace so, you know, hard fought for. So many people gave up so much. But I think we're going to cross to Westminster Abbey because our royal correspondent Cameron Walker has some very special guests. Cameron, let's throw to you.
I have some incredibly special guests, Emily. Good afternoon to you both. Well, I'm delighted to be joined here live on GB News by the great-grandson and the great-great-grandson of Sir Winston Churchill, Jack Churchill and Alexander Churchill. Alexander, let's come to you first of all. You had a very special job during the Westminster Abbey service, didn't you? Just tell me what you had to do with the candle of peace.
I had to light the candle of peace in front of the King and Queen and everyone in the Abbey.
And what was that like?
It was really incredible to know that I was lighting something of such significance.
I bet it was, and of course you also had to deliver a bit of a speech, didn't you, a reading. How much practice did that take?
It took a lot of practice. I practiced every day for the last week.
Wow, that's a lot of practice, isn't it?
Yeah.
And what does it mean having your great-great-grandfather as Sir Winston Churchill?
It makes me feel very proud, and I just feel very honoured that he is part of my family.
And do you learn about the Second World War at school at all?
Yes, yeah.
And of course, you had lots of people watching you, didn't you? So what was that like? Were you nervous at all?
Yeah, I was a bit nervous, but I pulled myself together and I did it.
You did very well indeed, and of course you're the next generation, aren't you? Is it important to remember the memories of people who were there during the Second World War?
Yes, it's very important to give thanks to all of the veterans and everyone who served in the war.
You did very well, thank you very much, Alexander. And Jack, let's come to you. Of course, 80 years since Victory in Europe Day, your great-grandfather stood on the balcony of Buckingham Palace with King George VI and other members of the royal family. I mean, it must be an incredible honour to have him as part of your family.
I mean, absolutely. I mean, sadly, I never got to meet him myself, but you know, I've been involved in a number of commemorations over the years, and this one is huge, obviously, because it's the last one that we're going to have a number of veterans attending, probably. So, for those veterans who are here today and at home watching on their televisions, you know, thank you so much from all of us for what you did back then, because none of us have any idea of the scale, the trauma, the stress that they all went through over 6 long years. And I don't know if you imagine that, you know, 70 million people died in the Second World War. 70 million, that's 7 times the size of Greater London. You know, the scale is just enormous.
And of course, you made the point that it's incredibly important to remember those sacrifices that people made 80+ years ago. And of course, for people like Alexander, the next generation, it's pretty important for us to remember, right?
100%, and I was thrilled that he was involved today. He's very lucky as one of a number of great-great-grandchildren of Sir Winston to have been included today. And he's got to meet veterans today from the Royal Hospital Chelsea, you know, men who are 101, 104 years old, who escaped from the Nazis, who jumped out of aeroplanes, who did bombing raids over Germany, and gave us our freedom that we have today. You know, these are remarkable. My father would call them the hero generation.
And what was their reaction when they found out that Alexander, great-great-grandson of Sir Winston Churchill, and you, great-grandson of Sir Winston?
Well, we were meant to be here a bit earlier to come and meet with you guys, but we got so distracted by talking to so many veterans, hearing their stories, and in fact, Alexander was given one of the roses that were given to the veterans during the service. So,
and Alexander, do you know the significance of the white rose? What's it for?
It's for the peace in the war.
And there was lots of young people who were giving out roses to veterans, weren't they?
Yes, yeah, there were.
And Jack, just finally to you, what do you think the legacy of your great-grandfather is in the 21st century?
I mean, I think he's one of these figures who's just so towering. You know, his achievements were incredible, but he, as he said, he had the roar of the British people, so he delivered, you know, the messaging and got behind the country and effectively the world to galvanise us all forward. And yeah, I think it's got to be freedom and liberty, and these are, you know, things that are greatly under threat in this day and age as well. So it's a great reminder, this anniversary, of all the things that we should be thinking about today.
Absolutely. And you both have a concert tonight for Course Guards Parade?
No, not tonight. Alexander's got a performance of The Lion King to take part in, so he's going to be very busy this evening with that.
Well, good luck with that, Alexander. Jack, it was a pleasure to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Thank you very much. Lovely to meet you too, Alexander. Well, of course, commemorations are going to continue right here on GB News, celebrating the 80th anniversary of Victory in Europe.
Oh, Cameron Walker, thank you so much for bringing us that interview. I must say our audience are rather taken by little Alexander Churchill, the great-great-grandson of Winston Churchill. Thank you. Yes, lots of you saying one that a family of us can be proud of. Well done, Alexander. What a lovely young man. Patriotic, bright young lad, says English Rose over here. Lovely young man. He could be a politician or Prime Minister. Well, you never know.
You never know. I mean, we do have some of those.
And Jack was fantastic too, but perhaps not as sweet.
I mean, what an effort it would have taken for someone just 10 years old to stand up in that. If you've ever been inside Westminster Abbey, I mean, it's the most enormous space and such a history there, from Edward the Confessor to the coronation of King Charles.
I can imagine you as a little precocious child doing it.
I don't know if I'll
do the media.
I don't know if I'd have had the gumption.
You'd see the microphones and walk towards them.
I don't know. To tell tell you the truth, once I was invited up onto stage at a pantomime and I was too scared to go up onto the stage.
You played Romeo, though, did you not?
I was a bit older when I played Romeo.
Oh, okay.
Or,
Teenager.
Yeah.
Well, that was rather nice. Keep your views coming in. Well, let's get some reaction from our reporters up and down the country. We're joined by Sophie Reaper in Wrexham and Doogie Beattie in Belfast. Sophie, you're in Wrexham. What's happening there this afternoon?
Well, good afternoon to you, Tom and Emily. It's been an incredibly poignant day here in Wrexham. We had a service at St Giles Church, which was very moving, and we then, in procession, moved from the church to the cenotaph here in Wrexham. So to talk a bit about that, I'm joined by not one, not two, but three very special guests. Good afternoon to you, gentlemen. Thank you all for joining us here on GB News this afternoon. Scott, I'll start with yourself. Talk to us about the procession today and how important it was to you to be a part of that on this special day.
Yeah, of course. So we led the procession. We're all volunteers, so we do this just for the love and the passion for drumming, but also for the Royal Welsh Fusiliers. Some of us served in the Royal Welsh Fusiliers, but some of us are civilian members. But I think more than anything else, it's pride and trying to remember the 1,300 or so servicemen from the Royal Welsh Fusiliers that were killed during the Second World War.
And we've seen hundreds of people down here today that were part of the procession, that watched the procession happening. How did that make you feel to see so many people come out to see yourselves and the procession as a whole?
It always feels great. It gets the hairs on the back of your neck standing up, especially when you're marching through town and everybody's cheering. Yeah, it's an amazing feeling, yeah.
Ian, we'll come to yourself next, if that's all right. 80 years since VE Day, an incredibly special anniversary today. How does it feel to be a part of such a special commemoration?
Right. Well, I'm proud to be part of the VE 80th anniversary. I'm so proud how many people turned out in Wrexham, but not surprised really, because in remembrance they always turn out in their thousands. So yeah, really proud to be a part of it.
And how did it make you feel to be a part of that today?
Yeah, like I said, myself, really proud, you know, and just feel good. We always set off and lead the parade, and it always gives us a sense of pride in doing this.
Thank you very much. And Paul, will come to yourself next, if that's all right. I know you served abroad, didn't you? So how important is it to you to mark this anniversary of peace, especially given the current circumstances around the world?
Well, still as a serving soldier, it's an honour and a privilege today to take part in the parade and to lead it with the regimental goat that commemorates our fallen forebears. So really proud and privileged. It's also very important to commemorate peace as well, as with the conflict going on around the world. But today I think we managed to have a good balance of both.
And just a quick message, if you had a message for our viewers today or people around the world about remembrance and never forgetting those men and women who made that sacrifice 80 years ago and continue to make that sacrifice, I should add, what would that message be?
Well, firstly, lest we forget, and remembrance is not just the 11th of November every year, Armistice Day and the Remembrance Parade. Remembrance really should be every day because of our forebears. We managed to enjoy the peace and freedom that we enjoy today.
Scott, Ian and Paul, thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon. There we are, three men who are incredibly proud to be British and incredibly proud to represent their country on this such a momentous occasion.
Well, Sophie, thank you so much for bringing us that there. And of course, thanks too. Let's move on now to Doogie Beattie, who's in Belfast for us. And Doogie, you're expecting a pretty special parade.
We are. I mean, just look at the Shankill Road behind us. There's bunting hanging from every single lamppost. It is absolutely amazing. And behind us, if we can just get the camera to spin round, there's an arch over the middle of the road. It's going to stay there forever. And when that's unveiled, there's every war hero that was from Northern Ireland on that particular arch. That'll be unveiled later on this evening. The shops here, we can take a look around at the shops. The shops are absolutely sandbags, Union Jacks flying absolutely everywhere. There's concerts to be on this road tonight. And then there's this, the local newspaper. It's a special edition, and inside it is all the pictures from wartime, right through to identity cards, everything else, and that's there to educate children. And the man that's responsible for that is John McVicker. And John, you join me now. How important was it to do this with this newspaper?
Oh, absolutely important. I mean, we see it as an educational resource for the local primary and secondary schools. It's about educating young people about the war years and what went on and how important that is for them to understand it.
Now, this area, when Belfast was bombed very heavily by the Germans, because we made a lot of weapons here, and Mackey's was just across the road from here.
Yeah, Mackey's would have been attacked, and there were also a number of air raid shelters that were hit directly down the road in Percy Street and up the road in the Woodvale area. There were a few hundred people killed as part of those attacks.
Yes, and it's important to tell our children those stories, but why is it so important?
Well, it's important, but from a community perspective, there has always been a very strong influence within this community in terms of serving in His Majesty's forces. There's not only those people who are serving currently now, but also veterans. In fact, tonight, as we unveil the arch, we will have a Second World War 101-year-old RAF veteran who will take the salute from the parade. He'll also be participating in the concert that we'll have in the Spectrum Centre.
John, thank you very much. So there you go, Tom. That's all coming along this evening. A huge parade, a reenactment parade, and they're meeting up with another parade at the bottom. There will be all sorts of vehicles, etc., on display, and a concert in one of the halls just up the road from here. It really is shaping up to be quite the evening. This morning they did the dignified bit. Now it's party time.
Fantastic stuff, Doogie Beattie. Thank you so much for being there in Belfast for us. I love this, seeing what's going on around the country, from Northern Ireland, Wrexham, where else have we been? Glasgow.
Absolutely, and it's so important what Doogie said there, to remember, yes, of course, there's the commemoration, there's the remembrance. Of course, people laid down their lives so that we could be free. But we should also celebrate the bloomin' fact that we're free.
Pour yourself a Pimm's, perhaps.
Absolutely.
It's what Churchill would have wanted.
But yeah, Churchill would have not got
the veterans, of course.
Churchill would have not got to this point in the afternoon without at least several glasses of champagne. But
he was a bit of a boozer, wasn't he?
He was a complete boozer.
He was, yes. It was allowed back in the day, then, for politicians to just be drinking willy-nilly.
Yeah, I think he... Boris Johnson's... spokesman during the height of Partygate made a slightly unpolitically correct comparison to say, you know, well, should people, journalists were asking questions, well, is having a glass of wine a normal part of a normal workday? And the spokesman at the time for Boris Johnson said, well, of course it was for Winston Churchill.
And Winston Churchill is one of Boris Johnson's heroes. He's written a book about him.
Certainly has.
Well, time for the Great British Giveaway. It's our biggest prize today. Yes, it is your chance to enjoy as many getaways as you like in your very own four-berth motorhome. What does four-berth mean?
4 people wide.
Yes, worth over £67,000. Here's the details.
Don't miss out on a prize package worth over £72,000, courtesy of Marquis Leisure. You could be driving away with this brand new Elnag Baron 560 motorhome. It comfortably sleeps 4, comes with sky roof, integrated kitchen and bathroom, and is worth over £67,000. Plus a further £5,000 in tax-free cash will make sure your next adventure makes memories to last a lifetime. For another chance to win the lot, text WIN to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus 1 standard network rate message. Or text BONUS to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus 1 standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB13 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 6th of June. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
Well, this is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. I thought you were going to go first there.
Oh, no, it's your turn.
Well, we've got lots more coming up on today's show.
Yes, cardinals are voting on the second day of the Conclave. This morning's inconclusive votes yielded further black smoke from the Sistine Chapel chimney. So we'll bring you the very latest live from Rome. There are expected to be up to 4 votes today. That in just 1 moment.
It's about 40 minutes until that trade deal.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. Weekdays from midday.
What this allows teachers to do is to divide the children into groups so they can be taught as in groups around a table, 3 or 4 tables in the classroom. Now, much more effective than that is to have a teacher at the front of the class and the children facing the teacher. It's called whole class teaching. It's what they do in the Asia Pacific. Now, if we don't have so many support staff, teaching assistants, schools would be forced to have more old-fashioned teacher at the front style teaching. So actually that will raise standards because we know we're already about 3 years behind the Asia Pacific countries. So going back to more traditional teacher-led teaching, having fewer classroom assistants will actually raise standards. But don't get me wrong on this, Andrew. Of course, on an individual basis, some children need support staff. So I'm not trying to rubbish support staff. There were some great support staff, but we've got too many. Therefore, we need to work within the existing budget. And to be fair to the government, and we're not party political, we're not either right or left. We would say, as far as the government is concerned, they've said that if there is a bigger pay rise than the 2.8% or 2.6%, which is inflation, it'll have to be paid from within the current budget. So the government needs to stick to that. They can pay it within the current budget, but you tell that to the teacher unions, and of course they won't want to believe that. They will say, no, we need more money. But if you go to the Institute for Fiscal Studies, they will tell you that since 1953, going back to the 50s, we've increased expenditure on education by 900% in real terms. Staggering, I know. And we haven't improved standards. So the success of the teaching profession is not about money. It's about the quality of the teachers. So we should pay good teachers more. And I wouldn't pay mediocre teachers more. I would pay good teachers more. So they have got a case, but we could do it within the existing budget.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 PM every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 PM and 5 AM as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Okoye, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dan.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 PM every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. At 22 minutes past 2, we can report that black smoke has again risen from the chimney of the Sistine Chapel this morning.
Yes, it indicates no new pope has been elected, and this is the second day of conclave now. There you can see the black smoke billowing out of the chimney.
But of course, there are 4 votes that could happen today. What can we expect throughout this afternoon? Well, joining us now from Rome is the senior global reporter at the Mail Online, Nick Pisa. Nick, when are we expecting, some movement, or is that basically asking how long is a piece of string?
Well, the Cardinals have gone back into the Sistine Chapel for the afternoon session. They went in about 45 minutes or so ago, and there will be 2 votes this afternoon, and then we will get burning of the ballot papers, which will give us an indication of whether a decision has been made. I should say, though, that for this 4th round of voting, there is a possibility that there could be a decision, and we may well see white smoke, but we won't know anything until about 5 o'clock local time, so not for a good hour and a bit or so.
OK, and can you explain a little more about how this voting works? Because, of course, it all seems quite secretive and we don't get to see inside or anything like that. Does it have to be unanimous? Do they put one against the other? Do they vote across the whole options? What happens?
So basically, there's 133, excuse me, 133 cardinals who are in the conclave. They're locked away. They're shut away from everyone. There's no outside influence. They're not allowed to look at the internet. They're not allowed to look at newspapers, radio, television. They are supposed to be inspired by the Michelangelo's frescoes that are above them in the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. They're supposed to be guided by God and the Holy Spirit. And as I say, there are 133 of them. And to reach the quorum, it needs to be 2/3 majority, which is 89 cardinals need to vote in favour of that particular pope or that particular cardinal that they feel should be pope.
Now, of course, in the past, a new system now, a more modern system that means after a certain number of rounds, it comes down to a final 2.
That's right, yeah. You're talking back in the 13th century when apparently it went on for 3 years before a pope was eventually elected. The shortest conclave was apparently 10 hours, again, many, many centuries ago. The last 2 conclaves have taken around about 2 days of voting, so this is sort of on a par. I mean, there is some sort of speculation going that possibly we may see.
I think we've lost Nick there.
I feel like we might have got a frozen image there.
Well, he's told us quite a lot.
He has indeed. I was just thinking back to the
13th century.
No, the election of the Speaker of the US House of Representatives, when they did about 19 different rounds of voting until they could find someone that was, acceptable to the coalition of Republican lawmakers.
It must be quite an amazing feeling as a cardinal to be elected Pope. A huge weight of responsibility on your shoulders. The background of these popes, all extremely different. Their politics, their ideologies, their worldview, where they come from.
Yeah.
Could we have an African pope? Could we have an Asian pope? Could we have a European pope? What's going to happen?
Yeah, huge suggestions that we could have another non-European pope. I mean, after centuries of basically most popes being Italian, it's becoming perhaps a more Catholic institution, and by that I mean Catholic. The origin of the word is universal. I mean, it's supposed to be the universal church. That's where the word comes from. So perhaps a more international pope is what we might get.
Absolutely. Well, I'm delighted to say we've got another very interesting and special guest joining us outside Westminster Abbey, and it is King's Scout, Abigail Farlane. Abigail, thank you so much for speaking to us here on GB News. Now, you were inside Westminster Abbey and you had a special job, didn't you?
I did indeed. Thank you for having me. So I was leading the rededication of peace. It was the last reading of the service, so I had quite a bit of responsibility there. I hope it went okay.
That sounds absolutely like a huge sort of moment for you, speaking after, of course, so many other significant figures in this service, and this service really being the culmination of, I suppose, a week of commemoration, of celebration. What was the atmosphere like inside the Abbey?
Oh yeah, I had some good company, didn't I? It was brilliant inside the Abbey. There was some good laughs, but I think just a sense of pride and sense of awe, remembering the joy of VE Day, but also obviously the sadness of the war, the years of war beforehand. So it was certainly quite the experience being here, being in person.
Yeah, fantastic. An amazing experience that so few get to have in a lifetime. But Abigail, tell us, what exactly is a King's Scout as opposed to your bog standard scout? And how were you chosen to have this role in Westminster Abbey?
Yeah, of course. So being a King's Scout, achieving your King's Scout award is one of the top awards that you can achieve as a Scout. So it's open for those of us who are bought 18 to 25, but usually you're kind of expected to get it when you're a bit older as you've had more experience. And so to achieve this award, you have to have a certain time as a scout, time spent as a scout. You have to have done a certain amount of nights away. You have to do an expedition, your physical skills, a bit of volunteering, a residential, and some activities from what we call the International Community and Values list as well. So quite a lot of stuff. If any of you at home watching have got your Gold DOV, think of that, your Gold Duke of Edinburgh Award, think of that, and then add about 6 other activities on top of that. So it's a real achievement, and it's really great that so many scouts managed to achieve this award. And yeah, as a King Scout, I got an email asking if I wouldn't mind being part of this ceremony, and of course I jumped at the chance.
Yes, absolutely the right choice there. I didn't get past the bronze level of the Duke of Edinburgh. So there you go. No, I wouldn't make it as a King Scout.
Well, no, I think I left the Scouts somewhere through my sort of secondary education, I think. But it is of course fascinating to see. I mean, such a roster of the great and the good of society, the top politicians, the top royals, so many different individuals there inside that ceremony. I mean, in many ways harking back to the initial VE Day ceremony led by Sir Winston Churchill, with that procession of parliamentarians into that same room. That sense of occasion, that sense of history must have rung out strong.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the procession of witness was probably my favourite part. Just seeing everybody walking down, just seeing the procession. There was a young boy carrying a gas mask, and that was like, wow, how young these children lived through this. And yeah, it was something really historic. I'm really proud to have been a part of it.
You should be. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your afternoon to speak to us on GB News. Really, really great to have you on. Abigail McFarlane, I don't know why I'm struggling with that, King Scout, and who was in Westminster Abbey and delivered one of the last readings.
Absolutely. No, just a momentous day. And of course, throughout the programme, we've been asking for your views, gbnews.com/yoursay. What are your memories of VE Day, or even what are you up to today?
Absolutely. This is Good Afternoon Britain on GB News. We've also got a lot else coming up on the show. Yes, Donald Trump, he'll probably be gearing up, yes, to announce this very special, this big and exciting day, he says it is, because it's a highly anticipated trade deal with Britain that's coming down the line at about 3 o'clock.
But just how extensive will it be? You can get full coverage of this proposed deal and President Trump's announcement live at 3 p.m. BST this afternoon. That's, of course, on Martin Daubney's programme. All to come after your headlines with Sophia.
Very good afternoon. It's just gone 2:30. These are your latest headlines. The top story, the US President says the US-UK trade agreement is a full and comprehensive one that will cement the relationship between the two countries. On social media, President Donald Trump hinted earlier at a trade deal with a big and highly respected country, later on saying it was a great honour to announce the UK as their first trade deal. Shortly after these reports emerged, the value of British sterling rose by 0.4% against the US dollar. The move follows President Trump's so-called Liberation Day announcement, which included 10% tariffs on UK goods and a 25% US import on tax on steel, aluminium and cars. Speaking at the London Defence Conference this morning, Sir Keir Starmer said he would always act in our national interest and ensure to deliver security and renewal for our country. Chancellor Rachel Reeves gave her response earlier.
An incredibly strong trade and investment link between the UK and the US. 1 million Brits work for American firms, 1 million Americans work for British firms. I was out in the States just a couple of weeks ago meeting the administration, and the Prime Minister will have more to say about the future trading relationship between the UK and the US later today.
And former Prime Minister Boris Johnson, speaking exclusively to GB News, has taken credit for the trade deal, saying it could only have happened because of Brexit.
Yes. So are you responsible for this, then?
Well, no, I'm not, no. But Brexit certainly is.
Right. What is it, by the way, first? Sorry, what is it?
Brexit's certainly responsible because we wouldn't have been able to do this deal individually with the United States if we weren't outside the European Union. That's for ding dang sure.
Ding dang sure.
And you can watch the full interview with Boris Johnson tonight at 9 p.m. on GB News during Patrick Christie's Tonight. Now, the Bank of England has cut interest rates to 4.25%. It's the fourth time interest rates have been cut in the current cycle. The cut was anticipated as the threat of an escalating global trade war looms and the economic growth outlook worsens. Some economists have warned that UK economic growth could slow sharply over the next 2 years because of Mr Trump's plans, which will directly impact British exporters, but could also weaken spending among households and businesses. Millions of lives lost, homes, cities and families destroyed, but all remembered today for the 80th anniversary of Victory in Europe Day. Allied forces celebrate the surrender document signed in Berlin by the Nazis to mark the end of World War II. Westminster Abbey hosted the VE Day service this afternoon, with the King and Queen alongside other royals and politicians all in attendance. A 2-minute national silence took place today at midday to commemorate the anniversary and to remember those who fought for our freedom. Earlier, GB News spoke to the great-great-grandson of Winston Churchill to hear about his role in the celebrations.
I had to light the candle of peace in front of the King and Queen and everyone in the Abbey. Really incredible to know that I was lighting something of such significance. It makes me feel very proud, and I just feel very honoured that he is part of my family. Yeah, I was a bit nervous, but I pulled myself together and I did it.
Those are the latest GB News headlines for now. More in half an hour.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome to your GB News weather update from the Met Office. It's going to be a dry day ahead, plenty of sunny spells, though that cloud sticking around for some. But where you do see the sunshine, it is going to be feeling warm. That's away from the east, though. The reason for the dry, settled weather is because we do have high pressure building across the country, but it's also dragging in a northeasterly flow. So more cloud feeding into eastern areas, a bit more of a breeze here. So that's just going to add on to a bit of a chill for the day. But many areas dry, settled, plenty of sunny spells, particularly across the west and across the far south. And it should be feeling warm in that sunshine too. Highs around 18 to 19 degrees Celsius, but across eastern areas temperatures only reaching around the mid-teens, so feeling a little bit chilly in that breeze. To finish off the day across Scotland, once again it should remain mostly dry. We'll see a mix of cloud and some clearer skies to finish off the day, and it's going to be fairly similar across Northern Ireland and northern parts of England. Some patchy cloud and also some clearer skies. Fairly similar once again elsewhere across England and Wales. There's still a fair amount of cloud lingering on across central parts of England. As we finish off the evening and head through the overnight period, it's not much change really, staying dry, a mix of cloud and clear skies, but a chance we could start to see some mist and fog develop by the time we reach the morning. And where we see the clearest of skies, temperatures are soon going to be slipping away. It's likely to be a chillier night compared to last night, possibly even seeing some frost by the morning, though this should be fairly isolated. So a chilly start, any mist and fog clearing quite readily, and once again it's going to be a dry, settled day. It's likely there's going to be more sunshine around if you compare it to this afternoon, particularly across central areas where the cloud is set to linger on Thursday. That's away from the northwest though, more clouds spilling in here, possibly some light outbreaks of rain by the afternoon, but otherwise feeling much warmer, particularly across eastern areas, highs of around 21 degrees Celsius.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon. This is the latest AI travel news from gbnews.com. Road users in Cheshire West and Chester face delays on the M53 southbound, closing all lanes between junctions 4 and 7 due to a collision. In Warwickshire, an incident on the M40 northbound between junctions 15 and 16 has closed 2 lanes, causing hour-long delays. The M73 northbound sees longer travel times from roadworks at junction 2 with diversions. The A465 is closed between Dowlais Top and CFN Coed due to roadworks with diversions. And on the trains, there is major disruption between Oxenholme Lake District and Carlisle on both Avanti West Coast and TransPennine Express services. For more travel news, go to gbnews.com.
Crash Law 24 sponsors GB News Traffic and Travel Report.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's 38 minutes past 2. And in the next 22 minutes, the US President Donald Trump is set to unveil the trade deal, or at least the heads of terms of this trade deal, between the United States and the United Kingdom.
Yes, everyone mark their stopwatches for 22 minutes, or is it 21 minutes now, Tom?
It's 21 minutes and 12 seconds.
12 seconds, there you go. On social media this morning, the President has already said the highly anticipated UK-US trade agreement is a full and comprehensive one that will cement the relationship between the two countries for many years to come.
Trump also posted that this should be a very big and exciting day for the US and the UK.
Of course, this move does follow President Trump's Liberation Day announcement, which included a 10% tariff on UK goods and 25% US import taxes on steel, aluminium and cars.
Well, joining us now in the studio is the economist and the fellow at the Centre for Brexit Policy, Catherine McBride. Catherine, thanks so much for being here with us. Of course, we're anticipating a big, bombastic announcement from Donald Trump. He says it's a full and comprehensive deal, but there's a lot of disagreement over what those words actually mean.
Well, we won't know until we see the details of the trade agreement, and even it's the same with the India agreement. You have to really read the fine print on all trade agreements. But it's great that he's looking for that, because that's what we should be looking for as well. There were lots of rumours it would just be a digital trade deal, which is really silly because that benefits the US's really big digital companies and doesn't benefit our consumers that still need a lot of the goods we're importing. And we're importing a huge amount of things which often come from either the EU or China, which we could get from the US. And the US has gone to a lot of trouble to bring manufacturing of things like semiconductors back to the US and get that away from China. And we should be their biggest customer because we haven't spent $52 billion trying to onshore this sort of business. We're relying on someone else to supply us with this, so why not let the US be that one? We're already getting so much fuel from them, not just liquid natural gas, but also wood pellets that we're burning, and also ethanol, which we now put in petrol. So when you get petrol, it's either E5 or E10. Well, that ethanol comes from corn in the US, and we import that from the US. So, but we could import clothes from them, which right now we put 12% on any clothes still made in the US, and they are putting up to about 38% on various clothes that we're exporting to them.
But of course,
and it's like, why are we doing that?
As things stand, we import much more from the United States than they import from us. Perhaps this is one of the reasons why we are at the front of the queue for this deal, because Donald Trump is so obsessed with trade deficits and the United States has a trade surplus with the UK. What opportunities could there be for UK exporters to the United States?
Well, actually, the UK and US exports are almost identical at the moment, and that is because we are now importing so much more fuel from the US than we used to. And that is really because we're not supplying our own anymore. Now, there's an argument to be had why that's not happening, but considering that it isn't happening at the moment and under the present government it's not going to happen again, we have to find another source for that, and that is never going to be the EU. They don't have any fuel either. They're importing fuel from the US, so we've got to move our supply chains, and the US is a secure country. We can rely on them. I know everyone's upset about Trump now, but for years and years and years, they let us take advantage of them, and we did. And we put we put so many tariffs on their goods.
Well, I really want to understand the picture here, because we've been talking about Trump's tariffs on us and how awful this is for the economy and for trade, etc., etc. What tariffs do we put on the United States as it stands, and could we see a drop in our own tariffs as a result of this deal?
Well, I really hope we do, because we have kept very high EU-level tariffs on a lot of food, apparently so that we can do trade deals, which is why Trump's done this. He's put his tariffs up so he can do trade deals. And guess what? Everyone wants to do a trade deal. So, for instance, on oranges, we have 10% on orange juice, oranges and 30% on orange juice. And this is just to protect...
How many orangeries are there in the United Kingdom?
Yeah, exactly 0. In things like beef, which we could import from the US, we import about 200,000 tonnes a year from Ireland duty-free completely. But in US beef, we put 55% tariffs on it.
Now, of course, these
Any surprise why 55? We don't import... Yeah, so we don't import any from the US.
But these rates weren't decided by Britain. These are sort of legacy rates left over because they're identical to the European Union rates, which, of course, were what we sort of... They controlled our trade policy for 40 years. I suppose one of the arguments there is that, of course, we're not going to have a particularly different tariff schedule until we do that deal with the United States. And since Brexit, we haven't had a deal with the United States.
Yeah.
So this is the first opportunity to get those down.
Yes, it is the first opportunity, and we must use that opportunity. We really must do a proper deal with them because we are not undercutting them. Unlike China or India or a whole lot of other countries, our wage rates are about the same as the US's, so that we naturally should both drop all our tariffs and quotas on each other's goods. Because, you know, we're not going to be undercutting each other. We should work together. And we already do so much with defence. It's kind of fabulous that this is happening on VE Day. And I wonder if... At first, when I saw there was an announcement, I was worried, well, it might be just a VE Day announcement. Yeah. But in fact, because one of our biggest exports are plane parts and plane engines, and a lot of those are going into military aircraft, not just civilian aircraft. And that's something we're really good at. We're very good at selling them precision instruments. We're very good at JCBs to the point where we don't export them anymore. They have a very big factory in the US and they're building another one in Texas at the moment. So that we do a lot of business with the US, and another big export for us are chemicals and pharmaceuticals. And we are driving one of our biggest chemical companies, in fact, not just our biggest, one of the biggest in the world, a company called INEOS. They are leaving and putting manufacturing in the US. So we're going to have to import those goods back that we used to make ourselves, but we've made pretty much driven oil and gas production out of business in the UK with high taxes. And we've got incredibly high energy.
Well, that's depressing, isn't it?
I know.
I mean, also looking at these green projects that have been axed at the same time as oil and gas jobs have been axed, it doesn't look like there's much of a vote of confidence in those kind of, you know, proper manufacturing, production of energy, all of this, which a country that wants to do well economically needs, surely.
Yes, if you want to have industry, you need cheap, reliable energy. There is no other way around that. Without cheap, reliable energy, you're not going to do basic industry. And even our precision instrument, you know, we're making plane parts mainly out of aluminium. We've got one smelter left. It's a tiny one in Scotland because it's got hydroelectric power. Everyone else is gone, so we need to import the aluminium from the US.
And that currently has a 25, or is it 35% tariff on it?
Well, the plane parts, it's interesting, the tariffs are not blanket tariffs. You have to go through it 10-digit tariff codes. They're very, very particular.
So it's not just the tax that people are paying, but there's an effect tax on labour because you have to go through all of these different forms and process this thing, and that just gums up trade no matter the sort of level of the tariff. It's also the bureaucracy.
Well, there is a lot of bureaucracy, but if you are a regular exporter or regular importer, you will have machinery that does this. You'll have it all online.
So, so there could be a different tariff for, I don't know, the bolt you use in an air wing or the airplane part?
Well, no, right now all aircraft parts have got 25%, but not engines. Engines are only 10%. And also, these 25% and 10% tariffs are incremental to the US's basic most favoured nation tariff. So that the cars are being tariffed at 27.5%, not 25, because they already had 2.5%. So you add the 25 on. A lot of people in the media seem to have missed that, and they think it's just straight 10%.
Well, we won't miss it now.
Yeah, exactly. So if they had sort of a 5% tariff on beef, they've now got 15%, you know, so and we've still got 55%, you know, so it's really ridiculous when you look at the food tariffs, even with the addition of the 10%, because the US has protection for their farmers. They're not, you know,
We're just running out of time.
Oh, yeah,
I want to get
sorry.
to that question with you, because I'm sure there'll be farmers in the United Kingdom that are thinking,
not very happy
hang on,
about that.
is a lot of American food going to come into the UK market? Do stay with us. We're going to go to a very short break now. And, of course, do stay tuned to us here on GB News. Around 10 minutes now until Donald Trump's announcement.
Ready to soak up that holiday sunshine?
Won't we need some cover?
No worries. All sorted.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
Whilst there's high pressure across the UK bringing largely settled weather here, it's a different story over more southern parts of Europe. A fairly potent feature is pushing into parts of the Canary Islands towards Madeira as well, bringing some wet and windy weather as we go towards the weekend. Elsewhere, a fair few showery bursts of rain around. We've had some heavy thunderstorms affecting Italy. They've now pushed their way a little bit further southwards, could cause some further issues, turning a little bit drier for many as we go through the weekend.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations Forecast.
The royal family is an enduring symbol of tradition, unity and pride for Britain. At GB News, we celebrate what makes this country great. In our new royal newsletter series, you can join me, Cameron Walker, for Inside the Palace, an exclusive look every week that takes you beyond the gates and brings you the very latest from those at the heart of the monarchy. Never miss a royal moment again. Sign up now. Go to gbnews.com/royal newsletter and get the latest straight to your inbox.
Exciting news. Every Friday, my Patrick Christie's Tonight Show is going to have a twist to it. We're welcoming some special guests. You. That's right, on Fridays I'm going to be doing my show in front of a live studio audience, because this show is about you and what you have to say. It's going to be the same big debates, same big topics, same big opinions. But every Friday night at 9 p.m, you are invited to come on down to Patrick Christie's Tonight to be a part of the action. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation, isn't it?
No,
because the failure is
you're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back,
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
and we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Dubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Headliners on GB News 11 p.m. every night. It's got 3 top comedians going through the next day's newspapers so you don't have to read them, which is great.
That's a good point. He's lying. I mean, maybe he's not lying.
That's Headliners every night from 11 p.m. and 5 a.m. as well on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, Britain. It's now 8 minutes until Donald Trump announces this exciting trade deal with the United States. But just how comprehensive might it be?
Well, joining us now is economist and fellow for the Centre for Brexit Policy, Catherine McBride, OBE. Catherine, we've just been talking in the break about what this might look like. I mean, what would the best of outcomes be for both the United States and the UK? Because Trump is going to want something in return if he delivers lower tariffs to us.
Well, we'll have to deliver lower tariffs to him as well. And that a lot of goods that we've been excluding with high tariffs and non-tariff barriers. I think that will be a big part of his comprehensive trade deal, he'll have to cover the non-tariff barriers. And we'll have to get back onto the line we were on when they were first doing the USTR's trade barrier report, when the UK had approved the use of GM-edited crops.
Which we're very good at.
We are very good at inventing them, and most of our best scientists ended up working in the US because under the EU they wouldn't let them use them, even though the EU is happy to import products made with them, such as Brazilian soybeans.
Oh, that's so annoying.
You know? Well, it is. It's very annoying for a lot of our people. So hopefully we don't go down the EU line and we go as we were. It's terrifying that we've got this reset, which would drag us back into the EU's unscientific SPS rules. And that's something that the USTR report was very firm about, that we have to base them on science.
But this is the worry, I suppose. You can sort of almost see this political communication sequence of we got this deal with India, now we're going to get a deal with the United States, two enormous countries, and then on the 19th of May we get the UK EU summit in London, when a deal might be signed, as you say, on phytosanitary and sanitary products. There's food regulations, if you will. The idea that we sort of have this show with the US today could be made more of than it actually will be, if indeed we don't have the deep, non-tariff sort of mutual recognition or whatever else it could be as part of this deal.
Interesting. I think we do definitely have to have mutual recognition of standards, because that will save us a lot of money. We know that our medicines, pharmaceuticals are a big export for us, and both the US and the UK do not put tariffs on pharmaceuticals, because we signed an agreement about that with a lot of other developed nations 30 years ago. Our medicines agency is as good at evaluating that our pharmaceuticals are safe as is the US Food and Drug Administration at deciding that theirs are safe. So we should recognise each other's standards. There should be no double...
Is that true? Because, of course, there have been contentious cases in the United States over drugs in particular.
Well, there probably have been too as well, but I think that in general, yes, it is true.
A little bit more laissez-faire, Catherine, is it fair to say, about drugs and things?
Not in my experience, no. I know that you'll see a lot of things on the internet about them, but I think you'll find that their testing is very, very sound. The same with testing for pesticides. Every country is very interested in not poisoning their own population. And it's kind of weird that they all decided that. Well, even China doesn't poison its own population.
I'm thinking of the Oxycontin, scandal where people
they were
handed out willy-nilly and huge numbers of people got hooked on these painkillers. And
well, yes, they were tested, but I think the handing them out was a different issue, if you don't mind. And that was
sales.
That was a sales. That was, yes, exactly.
I want to quickly get your thoughts on what might be a reflexive reaction that we hear from certain producers in the United Kingdom. If part of this deal is, of course, we get lower US tariffs on British goods going to America, and the UK drops some of these tariffs, as you were saying earlier, 55% tariffs on US beef. If those are dropped, I can imagine some farming communities, some beef-producing communities, thinking they might be worried about American beef being imported and that sort of competition for their produce.
Well, except they're already letting in 300,000 tonnes of Irish beef, completely tariff-free, quota-free. They've kept a quota on Australia and a quota on New Zealand. It's going to take 15 years before Australian beef can come in the quantities that Irish beef comes in. I imagine you'll find if there's a US deal on agriculture, in both directions, there will be some kind of deal in that respect. But meanwhile, the UK has to lift their sights a bit, because when I was researching the paper that I've recently written for Prosperity, I discovered that the US had no tariffs on lamb, on sheep meat, 0. And yet we were not exporting any there. And yet we complain constantly about imports. And you sit there going, well, why aren't we exporting lamb to the US? Because our exports would not compete with Australia or New Zealand's exports because of the seasonal difference. And yet we're not doing it. You know, our farmers have to think laterally. I know there are UK pork producers who export into the US and do so very successfully because the US was using ractopamine in their pork. They've now decided to do what Australia does and have a list. The USDA keeps a list of who uses ractopamine so that you can have ractopamine-free pork in the US, which would compete with, you know, it would make UK standards. We're presently importing 230,000 tonnes of pork from the EU. So why not diversify our supply chains? There is no reason for us to be completely dependent on the EU for food. We are only 62% self-sufficient in food at the moment, food production. So we have to import food. And if we have to import food
production, perhaps the safest thing to do, given different weather patterns around the world. I mean, if there's a drought here, being self-sufficient in food is a terrible thing. You want a completely diverse sort of supply chain of food, both here and the US and the EU and Australia and New Zealand. So, I mean, you have the greatest possible coverage.
Yeah, exactly. And already for things like chicken, I
Catherine,
know...
I'm terribly sorry. We've actually run to the end of the hour.
Excellent.
And we do, Catherine McBride, over you. Thank you very much indeed for your expertise.
We don't have to talk about chlorinated chicken, thank God.
We'll leave that to Martin Daubney, who is, of course, up next, and he's going to bring us Trump's announcement. We'll see how comprehensive it is. Martin.
That was so good. I was just happy for you to keep on going, fellas. Excellent show. Thank you very, very much. It's going to be big. It's going to be beautiful. It's going to be huge. Yes, welcome to the Martin Daubney Show today. We're going to have live coverage from Washington, D.C. of Donald Trump. We're expecting that any minute now, or what is proposing to be a truly historic deal. Now, remember, in 2016, when Barack Obama came to the United Kingdom and told us the United Kingdom will be at the back of the queue if we Brexit. Fast forward to 2025, we're at the front of the queue because